Second time's the charm is what you're saying?
Well, I think it's more like the 18th time, but just like the number of monitors. Um, you guys know the drill. Let us know if you can hear us, if you can see us. Yeah, how you're doing, what the meaning of life is, and that's about it.
Yeah, we are live indeed. It's funny because it just says live March 21st though. So somehow the
Oh,
title decided to
well,
throw
that's
itself away.
very easy to remedy in the meantime, as the games have appeared. So we're going to start here with, we're going to be chilling in the two-board view as well, but first of all, we got to give some love to Mr. Caruana. Take it away while I adjust the title.
Sounds good. Well, we see that we have an Italian game and Levon going back for his bishop e7 lines for everybody who hasn't been following. This is the elimination bracket. So if whoever loses this match, they are gone from the American Cup and take third place prize. And Fabiano, he lost his match yesterday against Hikaru Nakamura. That was probably upsetting for him. But if we're honest, in the first Blitz game, he had no chance. And then in the second Blitz game, Dinah, that was an absolutely hectic affair where Hikaru's defensive resilience was on full display.
Yeah, I mean, bend but do not break, right? Literally. I mean, he goes rank by rank. He's pushed to the first rank. It's like those movie scenes. Fabi's holding the knife down. He cannot get that blockader out of D1. And in typical Hikaru fashion, he doesn't just draw. He was winning in the final position. He swindled that 180 degrees.
Yeah, that was absolutely ridiculous. But you, on the other hand, needed no swindles today. I'm gonna give you a shout out. You know, it's early in the show. I just want to sing your praise a little bit because I was actually watching that game while on Magnus's stream. Like he was streaming and you two were playing, and I saw you take him down in a Rook game. And Danya, I have actually I don't know what to call it, a history question for you. But what game at the Olympiad did your end game remind you of?
Let me think. Can it be Lekwang Lim against Dingley Ren?
Exactly. I was thinking about that while watching the game live. I was like, wait a second, the king cut off on the e file, the black king coming over. So I thought that was an instructive similarity.
Listen, there was a big tie for first through fifth with 9 out of 11. As usual, I got screwed on the tie breaks. But you know what? I'm holding my head up high because I beat Hans Niemann in round 4. I woke up a minute and a half before this tournament started, somehow got out of bed, rolled over to my desk. So when I beat Hans, I'm like, okay, I need to lock in. Then I beat Mamedyarov. Then I beat Carlsen. Unfortunately, I did lose to MVL, and then I lost to Serrano. And then in the last 2 rounds, I beat Paravian and then Bluebaum. And somehow I've got 4th out of 5th tie breaks. Oh, and Bortnik, who won the tournament. I also beat him. How is this possible, Robert? How has this always happened? I'm off the soapbox. That's it.
I wish I could answer the question, but I do not know. I just thought you had a brilliant event, and I was glad to see it. I think you warmed up nicely for this coverage of the American Cup. And Danya, you love aggressive tactical chess. The Italian that we keep seeing, at least not typically, is it that aggressive. It's kind of more of a maneuvering game.
Yeah, knight h7 here. The Italian has been the order of the day. I'm sure that if you arranged openings by statistical popularity, at least in the men's section, the Italian would be first by a country mile. And every time it seems we see a subtly different direction, there's 2 axes, I would say, that can vary. The first is whether white puts the knight on c3 or the pawn on c3. The second is how black chooses to play positionally or more aggressively. I think Levon is choosing that second direction. King to h8, f7, f5, King's Indian style is how he wants to play.
He's a player of your own heart there, if he does in fact go in that direction. But it makes sense to me, Danya. I mean, just the way he's playing with knight on h7, he could of course bring the knight up to g5, offer some trades. But king h8, pawn to f5, he can open that side of the board with the pawn break.
Yeah, and if we check Opening Explorer, and then I'm going to take just a minute. I just ran from my laptop to my desktop and fired up the stream. So I need to take care of a thing or two. But before I do, 46 games with knight b to d2, 19 games with h3. Now, I guess I'm biased because I'm always carrying out these types of plans with the black pieces. With the white pieces, I would be feeling a sense of urgency. And especially in like a rapid time control where you like clarity, I would be tempted to push d4 sooner rather than later, Robert.
I agree. When your opponent's playing on the side of the board, often you want to strike in the center. And especially if you're the least bit concerned about getting attacked. So d4, sometimes it's a bit too soon because the e4 pawn can be vulnerable, but I think d4, Black's reply will likely just be knight to g5, offering some trades. And Fabi says, not yet. He goes knight bd2 instead.
I'm going to run this in ChessBase very quickly here to see what interesting statistics we can find. Yeah, knight bd2, a fairly normal move. And now knight g5, 82 games. But king h8, 27 games, scores extremely well. First occurrence, 1981, by a guy named Laszlo Hazai. And my coach, Lev Psakis, was the fourth to reach this position with the white pieces in 1984 against Romanician, absolute legend. Mm-hmm. That game went knight g5. So the early guys, they all played knight g5. A little bit later, this king h8 plan was implemented by Gabriel Sargsyan. And a couple of other grandmasters. Seems to be favored by Armenian GMs. I'm seeing
that's actually
Melkuman as well.
That's really important to note because obviously Levon, the most famous Armenian chess player outside of Petrosian. These days I don't know. Levon is such a national hero that maybe it's comparable. I can't answer that. But what I was going to say is Levon, of course, worked with all those players. He was on the Olympiad, winning gold medals with them. So if Sargsyan and Melkuman played this, maybe there's no surprise that Aronian did as well.
Yeah, and we can see Levon is deciding between king h8 and knight g5. One last comment, and then I'll leave you in the driver's seat, as I so often do. I don't know if that's following strictly in accordance with FAA regulations, but Robert Hess he's a mega pilot. He's been on the job for so many years. I leave my destiny in your hands. It's clear that Levon is deciding between these two moves. A lot of people who are less experienced, they want to go bishop g4. This is not advised in the Ruy Lopez and Italian because after h3, bishop h5, at the very minimum, white can complete this typical maneuver, knight f1, knight g3, either forcing black to get rid of this valuable bishop or to banish it back to a very passive square. Even the move g2, g4, very unpleasant. Black's bishop is devoid of any meaningful prospects. So white doesn't have to play h3, or at least doesn't have to rush with this move because bishop g4 is a lot less dangerous than it may appear. And with that, I pass it off to you. I'll be listening very carefully. You better behave, or there will be problems. Oops. What? Whoa. My computer stole my coffee. Okay, now we're good. Keep it up. I'll be right back.
Sounds good. See you in a sec, Danya. And the point that Danya just made, not about his coffee or his keyboard, it makes a lot of sense that oftentimes as players, we fear pins. We note that bishop on c8, it wants to go all the way out there to g4 and cause some trouble. But it's not actually a troubling decision because white's knight on d2 already protects the knight on f3. And that's why Levon says, I'm going to continue with my knight's journey. Knight f6 went to h7, now up to g5. And you're forcing off a pair of knights because the white knight technically is the h4 square available, but that's just a bad move because of knight h3 check at a minimum, and white's in trouble. So when you have less space, you often want to trade pieces because that frees up the remaining parts of the board for what's left. And why does black have less space? That bishop on e7, that decided to develop inside of its own pawn chain. Just a couple moves ago, there was a knight on f6 and a bishop on e7, so the bishop actually had no legal moves. So the knight did decide to jump out to g5. I think that we will see Fabiano consider moves like h3, as Danya mentioned, because now bishop g4 does feel a little bit more annoying. Now that the knight's already on g5, you're putting pressure on a pin piece. But in addition to h3, of course, the knight exchange could make sense. Or if Fabi is feeling frisky, it is a rapid game after all, he can decide whether or when he can play d4 in the center or even play on the queen side at some point. Just try to expand on that flank. But so far, it's a very peaceful affair between these two. I see a bunch of questions coming in. Have I ever played in the American Cup? No, it's a new event in the last few years. So when I was an active player, it just didn't exist. The game between Tatv and Irina is a King's Indian defense, a bit more exciting. I believe that. We will, of course, go from game to game as this is the elimination bracket for both of these matches. Irina crushed against Tatv-Abrahamian, and this one we have Levon Aronian against Fabiano-Caruana. So a pair of knights has indeed been traded. Let's see how Fabiano continues here because the knight journey of his own, it does make some sense. He wants to improve that knight on d2, which is blocking in the bishop on c1. But if he does move the knight, a second set of minor pieces will come off the dark square bishops, and black is saying, I have no real weaknesses. I may have a little bit less space. I want to point out that the knight on c6 is dominated by the pawn on c3. So for those of you who just want to remember little tips, a pawn 3 squares away from a knight, it dominates that knight because those forward jumps are no longer available. Danya, I see you're back. We're kind of matching almost. Oh,
No,
you
I'm
were back
listening.
again.
I'm just adjusting my camera a little bit.
Got it. We had sort of similar colors on as you were arriving back here.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want them to see my third monitor. Now you stay. Stay. Good dog. Good dog. And now it's crooked. Uh-oh. Now it's crooked.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What's going on over there, Danya?
Which am I turning it in the right direction? Like, is this better?
It looks kind of, I think it looks, that looks better, I think.
Okay, that'll have to do. I'm tilted. I'm like just inherently tilted. It's like I've got the leaning tower of bookshelf behind me.
I guess I was looking on our video call and not on the stream, but yeah, you do you do have a leaning bookshelf there.
I'm just not going to look at my camera view because that gives me just horrible OCD, and we have some rapid games to commentate.
Yeah, but now I've noticed it, and you are very tilted.
I mean, I can easily adjust. It's because I like there's a wire underneath my tripod. But
Okay.
my 6th grade English teacher was so good at this. Like, she'd make us stack up a bunch of papers, and then she'd remove the first sheet of paper without causing the whole tower to collapse, you know? Like, she was, like, competitive at whatever that is called.
Jenga?
Like, but, like, Jenga-type things. Like, it could be a stack of papers or a pile of books, and she would be able to remove the bottom one without, you know, collapsing the structure. So a few times when I've tried to adjust my camera on stream, the camera falls off the tripod. The tripod falls down. It causes my lighting, my studio light to fall. And it's like those, you know, homespun roller coasters. Or like Joe Pesci in Home Alone.
That's a good reference.
Should we look at Irina, or should we keep the 2-board view maybe with our two ongoing games? What do you think?
No, this one's pretty tame. So why don't we go to Irina versus Tatev, just because that's a King's Indian. That promises more excitement. And I know it's just an opening of your heart.
Whoa, okay, I see where Tatev got this from. I wonder who plays this all the time online, this exact line of the King's Indian. Uh-huh. I see.
Would it be a Mr.
I can't say it. You got to say it. Whoops.
Give me that drum roll again, please.
Danya? Okay, so I've had this. What would Danya? So Danya probably would like sacrifice all his pawns at kingside and probably just lose the game, right? But remember, it's a classical game. It's not a class, a rapid game. I'm going to do explore openings and tell you how many times I've had this position, exact position that we see on the board, in my Blitz games. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. There. So it's f5. E takes f5, bishop f5, right?
Yes.
60.
60, you said.
60 times I've had this position. So
And
I know
that
a thing
doesn't
or two
even-
about it.
And that doesn't even include like your casual games over the board or, you know, in all sorts of different settings.
Yeah, I mean, I had this in the World Blitz against Gelfand. That was the most serious game. And once or twice in other less important OTB games. I lost that game to Boris, but I was slightly better out of the opening. This is, I think, the future, potentially, one of the future lines that is yet to be explored. And it might be given in someone's course eventually at some point. Or not. I'm, not going to commit to anything.
Oh, that sounds exciting. And I feel like there's no better person to learn from than you in these King's Indian defense positions. I mean, obviously, Hikaru was huge in the King's Indian defense. Lately, it seems like he has decided on other openings, which, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, especially in the events that he's playing in. But what do you think about this position? Because you have so much experience. Do you think it suits Tatev's style? Do you think Irina's happy? Who do you feel is enjoying it more?
So let's unspool the tape here a little bit, because Tatev attempted this against Alice Lee. Alice deviated early. But Tatev is not discouraged. She clearly prepped this for the tournament, not just for an opponent. And second time might be the charm. So this originates out of the knight a6 variation, which, of course, is the sort of younger brother of the Mardol Plata, which is the main line, which is e5, short castle, and knight c6. Tatev starts with knight a6 to avoid the exchange variation, which Irina would not have played. So this is not an important subtlety. Bishop e3 is the most popular move. Rook e1, second most popular. And now queen e7, a move that I first saw played by Firouzja in an SDC match, I think against Wesley a couple of years back. It's been a fairly reputable sideline for a while, but nobody really thought anything of it. And d5 is met with knight g4. All of these moves in and of themselves may seem pretty standard. What is substandard is g5, right? Because oftentimes in the classic King's Indian textbooks, you're advised against getting this type of situation when there's a big hole on the e4 square. And so a lot of people, if they see this for the first time with white, they automatically drop their knight to d2. I think you'd agree, Robert, this is a very natural move.
Yes, of course. Just opening up the light square bishop and trying to get the e4 square under control.
And black responds with knight f6. And it turns out that black has this long-term idea of storming with the h-pawn, sometimes even without any preparatory moves, because bishop takes h5, you have this g4 resource. And if white plays f3, solidifying ostensibly her control over the e4 square, black actually throws the pawn up to e4, and tactically this works out. And I'll prove that to you because I've had this position 8 times, and I have won all 8 games with black from this position.
Of course you have. But that doesn't necessarily say much because you win positions that may seem completely hopeless, but this one does look particularly good for black. The bishop on g7 seems like a very happy customer.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not, saying this to toot my horn. It's just that I'm excited that they've gotten this position. My opening knowledge is narrow and insufficient. And Ditsky,
is it also Ditsky?
Oh my God. Beat you to it. Although that's probably a race to the bottom. So I don't know how proud I should be.
Yeah, I'm ashamed of myself, honestly. But it's been a week of coverage together. So for everyone who's been tuning in and enjoying, we appreciate you being here. But it's been a very fun week indeed, and stressful for the players, especially when they play the King's Indian and have to explore these treacherous waters.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to take off the analysis board from our analysis, or the eval bar from the analysis board. The computer assessment in the King's Indian, by and large, is irrelevant. Not totally irrelevant, but in the old days, I'm talking like 2015 and earlier, the engine would give like +1, +1.5 regularly. And every position in the King's Indian was +1. And of course, the opening lived and thrived. So it's like the OG human opening, in my opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think that the engines, they always laugh at this position and some others, but in actuality, it's really difficult to get to the end. Just you hit the space bar when you're at home, but when you're over the board, good luck to you. So Danya, this position, okay, I like the way black's pieces are looking. White, as you said, can bring the knight back to d2, but there are going to be some things that white has to solve, namely the e5 to e4 push. Like, is that going to be very painful? Can it always be met by knight to d4 if the knight remains on f3? But then, on the other hand, you said h5, h4 is definitely an idea for black. It just seems like black's having a lot of fun, and while white has done nothing wrong, the plans are harder to come by.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a standard King's Indian position. So Irina, she's a d4 player for life. She wasn't necessarily expecting to face unfamiliar opening territory this soon, and we know that she has greatly struggled in low time situations. You're absolutely right. Black does not want to rush e4 because the d4 square is too high of a price to pay. And Irina plays very concretely, chases the knight away, and I'm expecting Tatev to drop back not to f6 but to h6, which is a very important detail. Of course, knight f6 would simply hang the g5 pawn. And now, Robert, much like in a knight or for a sharper opening, King's Indian is a pretty sharp opening, the h3 pawn now acts as a hook that can allow black to jumpstart the attack on the king's side with g4.
G4 is incredibly tempting right now, just trying to open up more avenues for an attack. And I do want to point out, for people who say knights on the rim, aren't they considered dim? Yeah, the knight on h6 is not the best piece, but what square can it go to soon? f5. So even
Mhm.
bishop g6 right now, that catches my eye, Danya, because I would like to start improving all of my pieces. The knight on a6 to c5 in the near future, the knight on h6 to f5. It's a very unorthodox setup with the knights, both of them, on the rook files.
Indeed, great call. And indeed, bishop g6 is even more appealing to me than g4, which might run into some positional problems if you give up the light squared bishop. I have never faced rook c1. I faced in this position knight h2, knight d2, and rook to e1. And in response to rook to e1, I did play bishop back to g6. This like minor piece reshuffling, it's sexy. And white's queenside attack, it comes on very slowly, Robert. That's also important to point out. White has to play a3 and then b4 and probably another move such as knight b5. And only 3 or 4 moves later is she ready to play c4, c5. That is an eternity for black to set up potentially a devastating attack on the king side.
And the nature of the King's Indian, right, is black attacks on the king side, white attacks, air quotes, on the queen side, tries to crash through there. So I'm with you. I think that white's position does seem a little bit more difficult to play for the time being. So Irina has a lot of work to do here. And it's interesting because this game, it's much more of an open board than the one between Caruana and Aronian. But I'm starting to like Fabi's position in a similar way to how I liked it against Hikaru because I feel like he's just gaining space and doing all that. So both of these games, both these boards, they have plenty of time. The rapid time control rather than Blitz means that they start with 25 minutes and they're using their time wisely.
Man, commentating this right after playing the freestyle, it just seems like they have an eternity. 18 minutes, 15 minutes. It seems like classical chess. Of course, there will be a classical freestyle tournament coming up in Grenke. But game in 25, really not the same vibe even as game in 15 plus 10 as it was in the World Rapid. That extra 10 minutes, it almost makes this, in the eyes of someone like Andy Woodward or Adiz Gurel, they're like, this is classical chess on steroids. Like I can eat my shawarma and, get ready for school, brush my teeth, come back and still have enough time, to puzzle out the intricacies of the King's Indian.
Yeah, it's just so different. Adding in this case, 25 minutes plus 10-second increment for the players. It feels like an eternity, and that could cause people to rush, right? If you are playing a mix of time controls, as they are in the American Cup. Bobby's latest game was a game of Blitz. Now today he's playing Rapid. For Irina, she was playing Rapid yesterday, while Tata was playing Classical. So it's a very weird dynamic for some of these players, but you have to adjust. You're professional. You have to just play the board in front of you.
But one parting comment I'll make, and then maybe we can switch back to the Fabi game, eventually settling into the two-board view once both games start to heat up, is that Tatev experienced this with Alice, right? Clearly she did her homework from a theoretical standpoint. The problem is you have this issue of also learning ideas. So the moment your opponent deviates from the charted course, if you're not familiar with an opening, and Tatev is fairly new to the King's Indian, you run the risk of simply staring at the position and having a feeling akin to seeing an article in a foreign language. Like you see words, they combine, you have no idea what it's saying. Maybe you recognize 1 or 2 words here and there, but you have no idea which idea to apply in which position. And I'm really hoping that Tatev will demonstrate a good knowledge of like the basic ideas here, because if you don't know this bishop g6 knight f5 regrouping, it might be hard to come up with some of this on your own.
I agree, because I think G4 then becomes tempting. You want to play as ambitiously as possible. You play the King's in after all. So it is difficult to make little retreating moves. You sort of step one piece back so you can improve another. And for Tatev, we know how ambitious she is as a chess player. G4 is a very good move regardless, but it's a very Tatev move as well.
And there's a lot more here, like knight a6 to c5. Sometimes it's a good move. Here it would run like right into B to b4. But just to give you an example, Boris Gelfand, he played against me knight to d2, knight f6, and here he played rook c1. And here I played the correct move, knight to c5. What's the difference? Well, he played b4. Here the knight is able to jump into d3, and because of the multiple attacks, white is forced to part ways with the bishop pair, and already all of black's opening problems are solved. So comparison is very important. Obviously, here the d3 square is inaccessible, so knight c5 would merely play into white's hands. The knight is a very important piece, actually, because, yeah, it's grim, it's dim, but it retards the progress of white's queenside pawn storm, without which it's almost impossible to develop meaningful queenside play.
Yes, white does need to be in a hurry over there, but you correctly noted that it takes several turns just to protect the b4 square. And even if you had pawns at a3 and b4, c5 doesn't happen as soon as you'd like. So I'm with you. I think that Tatev is thinking, just trying to, play accurately. She doesn't want to slip up here and get into a strategically dubious position. Whereas Fabi against Levon, actually, we're tuning in at a great moment because just 2 turns ago, or I should even say last turn from white, he played f4, Danya, and I get why he did it, but he also is giving up the bishop pair, and the board is opening up. So I'm not sure I love Fabi's decision to play f4 right when he did.
I don't either. I'm with you. I think it's a move that elicits a lot of oohs and ahs. It's a move that, he goes tall mode, and what an explosive central breakthrough. But I think the latent drawbacks of this move override the satisfaction that you get from playing such a move and grabbing control of the center. Levon with an excellent response. Knight c6 to a5, a move that makes less noise but takes care of business. Robert, at a minimum, black can grab the bishop pair, play e takes f4. This knight on g3 will be subject to a potential h5, h4 idea. Levon can fix his a-pawn on a defended square as well. I'm not really seeing the zen of white's attack on the king side, with the knight being as restricted as it is. Where is it going to come from?
Well, I was talking about this from the opposite point of view, where on c6, that knight was dominated by the pawn on c3. So great observation, Donnie. The knight on g3 is dominated by that pawn on g6, a pawn 3 squares away from a knight. Just it makes it look a bit silly on these squares. And so I don't like this. If we just go back a couple turns before f4 was played and b6.
Why?
Okay, he's saying I'm gonna get your bishop sooner or later. Bishop d5 met by pawn to c6. So I guess Levon is unafraid.
How critical am I allowed to be in this show?
As critical as you'd like.
All right. Don't hate me. I mean, actually,
Okay.
you can. I feel like if my coach Lev Sahis were watching this and this was my game, I would get like a threat of hanging up the phone after b6. Okay. You have option to get bishop pair. Okay, cash in the check, go to bank, get money, and be happy. No, you have to be fancy. Yes, okay, you get burned for it, and we finish the lesson. Sorry.
So how do you translate that into terms that everyone in the audience can understand?
I have no clue, actually, what Levon Fabi should do. My tactical brain, like my freestyle brain, says bishop d5, c6, and b2, b4 at least has to be calculated, and that chaos might end up rather unpleasant for black because of the amount of pawn islands he's going to have. But I'm not planning to calculate that, so if only I had a partner to cover my tracks.
Well, I think your instinct was spot on, both in terms of your impression and in terms of your chess awareness, because the bishop on g7, it can be buried in now. And if we just go back before b6, right, you were advocating for knight takes b3, a takes b3, and e takes f4. And we do see the bishop pair. The bishops aren't the best pair we've seen, in chess history, but they have the possibility to open up more diagonals later, right? You said h5, h4 comes to mind, b6, bishop b7, just a fianchetto later. But in the game now, white is first to the punch, and the move f4 to f5, it shuts the bishop in, and sure, the bishop can go to b7 for black, and maybe that's even what Levon is aiming for, just to try to develop that way. But then white, I think, can gain even more space in the center, like f5, bishop b7, d5, and just say, I am closing down the a through d files as much as I can. Your bishops are terrible, and then I am going to shift all of my focus to the king side.
And one expression that really resonates with me is white unties his hands for further action on the king side. When the center is closed, you can redirect your effort single-mindedly. And Robert, I'm already learning from you. This is one of the reasons I like commentating with you. Is oftentimes when I want to go full Sparta, explosion, chaos mode, the positional approach I learn is often a far wiser kind of approach to the position. And this is a great example of that. You don't even need to calculate bishop d5 because there exists this golden opportunity to make black regret procrastinating on e takes f4. I applied that kind of thinking even this morning to beat Mamedyarov. I played a rare positional game, and I thought of you when I was holding myself back from sacking all my pieces and resigning, which is how I usually lose to these guys.
Well, I appreciate that. That's actually something that even someone as strong as Mamedyarov had to learn, right? He worked with Alexei Dreyev, and he went from being hyper tactical at all moments to adding in quite a deal of positional play and changing some of his openings to boot. So we see Bishop A6. This is smart, I would say. I know that the evaluation is aiming in White's favor. That makes a lot of sense to me because White is the first towards kingside aggression. I still think that White should shut it down in the center. I think that shutting down the center, then switching to the kingside fully makes a lot of sense to me. But the bishop on a6 is a bit annoying, Danya, because rook f1 becomes a lot more difficult to orchestrate.
Yeah, it's a thorn in White's side. It's this kind of weird control over the c4 square. It really kind of severs the connection between the two flanks. So I totally feel you. d5, it's a schematic move, right? You're thinking schematically. You're thinking in terms of what's the principle here? Well, I want to close the center so that I can redirect my forces to the king side, and so that I don't have to constantly deal with, the fluctuations and the volatility inherent in an open center position. Black can play like knight b3 and d5 at some point. Of course, not immediately, but I think people get what we're saying. You mentioned that Mamedyarov used to be a tactical player. That is a shocker. When you said that, my Ralph came off.
Oh my goodness, you didn't have to
But
bring
I
in
did.
the Mamedov of them all with these Azerbaijan references. But
Let's get back into the game.
well, what I'm thinking about with this position is the roll of Hess, right? There in the Spanish, you play d4 to d5, and your pawn is back on f2. And then you play h3, knight h2, and so on to get a kingside initiative. Here, it can be like the Spanish, but your pawn's already up on f5. So it's like you didn't have to do all the heavy lifting, all the hard work while black is regrouping. You're just, also just like small little moves. Here, you just can focus your attention fully over on the king side. I think that Levant is doing the right thing now. Queen out to h4, just making White's task a little bit more difficult. And I don't see a clear breakthrough. It's actually a bit frustrating looking at this position because how does White improve from here?
Well, White improves by following Robert Hess's advice. And for me, it's painful to play d5 because I was already flirting with, bishop takes f7 ideas. I want to show why that doesn't work. It may seem very tempting, f takes g6, but the king simultaneously picks up the pawn and protects the rook on g6, and White hits a dead end. So d5, yeah, it shuts down the bishop, but you can't make an omelet, or in this case, a kingside attack, without breaking some eggs. Yeah, bishop's going to cry about it. Ignore it. It's not about the bishop. It's not all about the bishop, I should say.
Yeah, I think that White can, if you don't take it, keep that bishop though, right? You can move the bishop, play either a4 and b4, and just continue to gain some serious ground here. And the only way that black can break open some of this board is to play the move c6. But I think that helps White in a different way because as soon as you take on d5, if my bishop is say on c2, you're opening up the new diagonal for the bishop to flex its muscles.
What a move that would be, right? We talked about putting a rook on a closed file, anticipating it to open. Same principle, putting a bishop on a semi-closed diagonal with the foresight that it will open up and the bishop will once again become a beast. And some of my favorite types of moves, Robert, when both bishops slide back, right? Climbing down the smaller tree just to climb up the bigger tree, and rook e4 is on deck with absolute and total devastation. This produces an aesthetic effect on me when you see bishop c2 and then bishop c1. I prefer bishop c8, but bishop c1 will do.
And in all honesty, this whole bishop c2 thing, I was just trying to illustrate a point, but if black plays c6 in the live position, I think White can just take it. Then black is saddled with this backwards d6 pawn. The bishop on b3 is super strong as well. So I'm just looking at this position. You see Levon, he desperately wants to gain some space. He's sitting passively here, and he goes rook c8. But I think white can preempt all this with uh, bishop a4, c6 being met by pawn to b4. That's also on the table right now.
Maybe black can try b6, b5 there. I'm very partial to bishop c2 because it also reinforces the e4 pawn, which is kind of the linchpin of white's construction, so it doesn't hurt to overprotect.
I agree. It's just also thematic in the Spanish you play in this style. So I'm looking at this position. I'm liking what Fabi's been able to accomplish. Levon, he's in trouble on the board. He's just getting squeezed, and he's also in trouble on the clock. Usually Levon is well ahead, but now he's down 5.5 minutes.
Well, we welcome everybody. Happy Friday, who joins us for a big day. Big day when two of these gladiators, Fabiano, Levon, Tatv-Ina, they can't all make it because this is the losers bracket. They've already struck out once. If they strike out a second time, they're out of the tournament and they don't get to challenge the winner. And bishop c2, Fabi says, I want to challenge the winner and I want to be the winner of this game. Levon has so many chances to take this bishop, and that ship has now sailed.
But we understand why he didn't take the bishop. You take the bishop, you feel good about it, but you also open up the A file, so the rook on A1 would develop in its starting place. And this just is a good old-fashioned squeeze. And for Levon, he's not having any of the fun. It's not like, when your grandmother squeezes you tight and gives you a kiss on the cheek. This is like when you owe someone money and then they're just squeezing the life out of you. And that's what it feels like right now, is that Fabi's, maybe he feels owed one after yesterday's end against Hikaru.
Well, that escalated quickly. Jeez. It's funny. What's so depressing is like white can respond to these moves by not responding to them because c6 doesn't even really threaten cd. Even bishop e3 takes b6 comes to mind.
Wow.
Levon plays rook a c8, and that actually somehow makes c6 worse. Ugh.
That's a great find by you, by the way. Bishop takes b6, I think, is just good for white. You sacrifice your bishop for 2 pawns, but then you win a minor piece right back.
Yeah, I'm going to check this with the engine here. It's decent, but what it allows... Oh, wow, it allows rook c8 to a8. And by the way, c6 has happened. And the point here is queen a5, bishop to d3 forces white to give up a queen for a rook and a piece. So this would be unnecessary. And I'm a little surprised. Levon insists on the move c6, and Fabi actually takes it. Rook ad1 is coming next.
I think I can see that the evaluation where the live board went down a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, with that last move. But I'm taking that with a grain of salt. This is just so clearly better for white. The bishop on g7 is more or less useless. Knight c4 played by Levon. I'm already thinking, like, can I play bishop d3 and just pin your knight and go for some tactical sequence? But actually that might be a blunder because bishop d3, knight takes e3, bishop takes a6. There's knight g4, and that knight wraps around and hits the white queen and threatens a big attack.
Well spotted, but you can always double back. Like bishop d3, knight e3, rook e3, and we're getting into like Smyslov-Rudakovsky territory, which is a game that I am more sick of than the opera game. And so is everybody who's like watched my stream for more than 5 minutes. It's a good game for me to show during the break, so I'll make a mental note.
Okay. I can't wait to see your teachings there, but it's the worst bishop you could ask for on g7 against not the best knight, but a knight that can reroute itself to some great squares. d5 in particular looks juicy.
Oh, absolutely. And Smyslov-Rudakovsky, people are like, is this a car brand? Is this is this one person? It refers to a game played between Vasily Smyslov, the world champion, and relatively weaker player in the 1940s. And this game is always shown by any Soviet-trained chess teacher to illustrate the concept of like good knight versus bad bishop. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I remember that one, right? It's got the knight pawn structure, right, and the knight on d5.
How did you remember that, Robert? It did come from a Najdorf.
Oh, was it knight over? I just remember like the bishop is terrible and the knight is like that's like the prime example of bad bishop against great knight.
Man, I thought we might have to iron Myron it out, but no, you remember it straight off the bat. But Fabi, maybe trying to overdo it. C4 does create a hook, so I'm immediately asking myself, well, what about B5?
But the A7 pawn, you mentioned there's bishop takes B6 in the previous position. I think queen takes A7 looks good enough, where B takes C4 is meant by pawn to B4.
Are you sure about that, Robert? No.
I'm not. Is that a Miron joke? Or still, you're actually.
No, I'm genuinely like very skeptical. B5, queen A7 just looks terrifying to me from a tactical perspective, somehow.
But what can black do to punish it?
Well, let me put this on the board. B5, queen takes A7, BC, and
B4.
first of all, very nicely spotted because knight B7 runs into B5. As Yasser would say, like my spidey sense is tingling here. And of course, I have no move for you yet. Queen D8. If only this bishop could jump across the E5 pawn. Darn it.
Sorry.
Not seeing it, actually. But can you understand where my skepticism comes from? I feel like this puts everything into the hands of very specific tactics. So maybe for Levon, there is no immediate rush to play B5. What do you think he should do? Should he drop his queen back to E7?
But if you don't play B5 now, white can play A4, and you're never playing B5.
Do you want to know what the engine move is? It's the most anticlimactic move ever. It's rook C back to C8. The problem with C4 is not only that it creates a hook, it also creates a weak square on D4. Black's knight actually jumps in very, very quickly. And Levon plays exactly that. He plays rook to C7, same idea. And he prefers B5.
I was going to say, even stronger on C7, protecting that loose A7 pawn. This still looks very good for white to my eyes, but you're absolutely right, Danya. The D4 square now is black's for the taking. Even if white puts a piece that aims the D4 square, I still think black's going to put the knight there because the bishop on G7 would come to life. If you could take the E5 pawn and throw it off the board, that would be good for black at this point.
Yeah, we talk about it often, capturing your own pawns. Fabi prepares to capture the enemy pawn on A7. You pointed out that idea, and the point is not that you're taking a pawn. The more important point is that you're vacating the B6 square, right? Because that is, if white puts any piece on that square, queen or bishop, it's going to come with tremendous consequences for black.
Is there going to be an exchange sacrifice on D4? That's what I'm wondering. I don't think it actually works out. Well, does it work out? Rook A D1, knight D4, and a bunch of takes.
And you know what?
The white queen.
I would actually start with rook takes D4, because if you take with a bishop, I very well might consider not accepting your sacrifice, because my dream would have come true.
Yes. You could just sit your bishop on E5 instead of taking a rook on D4. I'm with you there. But what's the... Although bishop E5's F takes G6 looks very unpleasant.
But let's try to assess, first and foremost, this position. If everything is traded on D4, does white garner sufficient, overwhelming compensation for the exchange? Queen back, for example?
No. I like black.
What about knight H5?
Well, what about E5 as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, then D takes E5?
Rook takes?
Queen F. No.
It's a very complicated position.
And you always have this button you can press, F takes G6, which exposes the 7th rank, ensuring that white can pick the queen up with check. This comes out of nowhere, and white's got this devastating attack suddenly.
I feel like something should save black here. I don't fully believe in it, but I would be scared to have the black pieces in a position like this.
Yeah, against an angry Fabiano Caruana. Queen B4 maybe, but then the knight jumps into E4, and I blunder mate in 1.
I mean, I guess Queen E7, now that we're looking at these variations, Queen E7 sort of walks into white's attack because E5 is the move you want to play. So I wonder if there's something better than retreating the queen to where we first thought it might go.
So this is one critical position. What are the alternatives to Rook A1 if we take the sort of long variation, wrong variation approach? Is Fabi also considering something like knight to E2, trying to kind of take the tension out of the environment? No, he plays bishop d3. He says, have the d4 square. I don't care. I'm just going to reposition and get out of the firing zone of this knight.
I like it. I think that this is a very smart way of playing this because the knight on d4 in and of itself doesn't threaten anything. It's not like, white has not played a2 to a4, so the b3 pawn's already defended. And so Fabi is focusing his attention on the f file. And a big question that I think is typically difficult to answer is, does white threaten f5 to f6?
That's exactly what's on my mind. And it's a question Fabi wants Levon to take his time answering because he's down to 4.5 minutes. Lovely, lovely sequence there by Fabi. It's not going to win a brilliancy prize. It's not going to be noticed in the daily recaps, right? But this decision to play rook to f1, get the queen to f2 and the bishop to d3, excellent, just like heads-up decision-making by Fabi. And Levon, he's getting desperate. It's now or never for him.
So he plays b5. So this is the big question. And this is a good example, once more, of how top players would rather, say, sacrifice a pawn, as you're showing bishop takes d4, e takes d4, f6. Black is going to be down a pawn, but at least there are going to be some counter chances. I think this was a very smart try here from Levon.
I don't think I would be able to resist the temptation to start with f6 and then think.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, if you don't take on d4, the knight can go from e6 to f4 at some point. What do you spot?
That's another one of my dumb brazen ideas. I was thinking bishop takes d4 and then e5 and take twice on g6 with like queen c2 at some point. Like the contours of a mating idea originated in my mind.
I definitely feel you should show that because it's really instructive how you're noting the light square bishop on d3 is actually an attacker that's just hiding behind some pawns.
Bishop e5 runs into fg and the rook on f8 is exposed, but the only line that I saw was bishop takes g6, driving out the king and queen c2. Unfortunately, now, once we reach this position, you realize things aren't so simple. This is checkmate, but black has e4, white plays knight takes e4, and I mean, it's anyone's game here. Probably white's, actually.
Although, you are going to be down quite a lot of, exactly, d3, queen takes d3. The white is sacrificing quite a bit of material. And if I just saw that bar flicker on the screen, black is winning. Oh,
BC is winning.
Me?
Oh, come on, just, nope, party's over, cops are here.
Oh my goodness. Just shutting down the diagonal. That's from in the moment, right? Once we're here, b takes c4 makes perfect sense. But when you try to visualize these kind of variations, you're not seeing b takes c4 5 moves before it happens.
And again, restraint, right? You have this option. It's easy to waste your time calculating it. It's the mark of a mature player, and it's also the mark of Naroditsky to just to resist the temptation. Go for the meat and potatoes option, which in this case is probably some combination of f6 and bishop takes d4. Maybe the advantage is not as big as you want it to be, but if Fabi can keep the pressure up, you got to believe he's the heavy favorite in this position.
It does look good for white, but I think you and I are both signaling that the f6 pawn, now it's being used for strength, later can become a weakness that white's forces are tied down protecting. So the knight on g3, not the best piece. And that's actually what Miran would always say, that knights on b3, g3, b6, and g6, they end up getting stuck there, or they just stay there too long. But the knight on g3, it's like not doing all that much, and it's a piece I would love to improve, but I just don't know how.
I've not a word that's used every day, but I've decided to muzzle the computer, at least for the time being, because it is being capricious, it is shouting and trying to steal our thunder, and Levon cannot be blamed for trying to jimmy up some counterplay in the face of this f6 idea and in the face of imminent danger to his king side.
You just made me think of ICC by saying muzzle. It's been a long, long time since I've heard that word in a chess setting, but either way, we see the clock here, 4.5 minutes for Levon, just under 6 minutes for Fabiano. So these players are going to have to think on their feet. 10 seconds added with every single move played. I still find it easier to play from the white side.
Once I did this, the computer actually speaks Yiddish. It said Mazel Tov.
Um,
I'm driving you crazy. It's only been one
no,
week, Robert. Get ready. You're going to have to
it's
find
funny.
a defensive mechanism against this.
It's funny because people think like, "Oh, he's mad," or I don't know. You just catch me by surprise. Like, you just have an endless like storage facility worth of punts. It's incredible.
Hey, it's not like New York City. Charlotte has a lot of open, large spaces. And now people wonder what I do in the shower. It's like a combination of Wesley impressions. And
I
sometimes I
hope
do
people
punt as Wesley. Like I pretend I'm Wesley and I invent punt as well.
I hope people don't wonder what you do in the shower. That feels like it's a private matter.
And what's not a private matter is the queen side because it has been eviscerated. Queen b6, queen e7, but then white collects d3 at the end. So black needs to
Ooh,
find something better.
there's nothing better, is there?
Well, the exchange sack is a complete dead end. Yeah, I'm afraid you have to go for this and hope that you get some Benko style compensation at the end. Let's not forget this h5, h4 idea. This bishop obviously needs to show signs of life eventually.
So the bishop is a problem. D6 will be a problem. I mean, this is likely what we're about to see. These trade queen e7, queen
Ooh.
a6, rook a7, queen takes d3, and it, you're trying to throw an f6 at some point.
Well,
It looks
Captain
like.
Ketchup in my chat, wants to know what about queen e7, f6, but I don't think it works because again, you can only take one piece at a time.
You would like just force black essentially to want to take on a7, but that's well, I guess you are for like f6, bishop takes f6, rook takes f6. The rook will still take the bishop on a7, and the a6 bishop will be defended. Quite a sequence, though.
Quite a sequence indeed. And shall we go to our two board view? Because the Tatev game, it's been a lot more kind of vanilla. It's been kind of keeping its essence for a long time, but they're moving to the time scramble phase at a breakneck pace. Tatev burning through her time. I think we've got it set up. What do you think?
Yeah, let's go to that game as well. And you know what's funny is that Bobby and Levon have been playing a bunch of moves. The positions completely changed. It almost seems like Arena and Tata forgot that they were playing a chess game. Not much has happened. They are low on time, but I mean, we just have had a
Nice.
couple trades, and that's that.
That is that. Okay, so here we see this game. Just a moment here. Uh, Sorry. Every time this, for some reason, misaligns. I don't know why. Okay, so this is this. Let's bring this out. Okay. And we bring this board over here. And we have it. Boom. How do you like them apples?
Well played.
Queen to d8, by the way. Speaking of well played. He didn't put it on e7. He brought it all the way back.
So, oh, he's gonna go queen takes bishop, then queen to a8 on our blue board. That's quite a brilliant sequence, I must say. Getting the queen to a7 with check, and then just trying to get some activity of his own. So Levon, he comes up with these ideas in his sleep.
Yeah, I mean, the word that comes to mind is finesse, right? You're going to win the bishop either way, but here, queen a6, queen a8, the queen is going to be in sort of starting in pole position to help the rooks get that counterplay started down the c file, down the a file. White's task is a very difficult one, White's technical task.
So I'm with you there on the blue board. On the red board, I also think White's task is difficult because Black just played h5. The threat is pawn to g4. And it seems like Black has a free hand, a big attack brewing. And down to the bishop on h2 on the red board, that's also a bad piece. The bishop on g7 isn't great, but it's about to slide up to h6 and get a new diagonal to work with.
Such an instructive position. Visually, right, White controls the e4 square, but there's so many other factors, and Black exposes all of the worst factors in White's position with the move g4. Bishop h6 becomes possible, g3 becomes a threat, and this is Tatev's wheelhouse right here. This is her chance to erase the memory of that devastating end of the game yesterday against Alice Lee.
And Tatv historically has not done well against Irina Crush, in part because Irina's been the higher rated player, but also I think stylistically, Irina's a difficult opponent for Tatv. Tatv loves tactics, Irina more of a
Oof.
strategic player, and Queen G5. Okay, we're going to see a bunch of mistakes coming up. Both players are in full blitz mode at this point. So Queen G5, Donna, the move isn't liked. We see the question mark. What's the actual problem with it?
Well, first of all, you can understand why she played it. She wanted the knight to have, a full range of mobility, didn't want to deal with the potential queen trade, and was preparing for knight g3, which Irina sort of stubbornly plays anyway. Now black can go knight d4 or knight h4. What's the problem with it? Radio silence is what you're going to get from me. And a brilliant knight jump is what you're going to get from Tatv. I would have preferred bishop h6 and maybe even a rook lift to the h-file. So if I'm the informed viewer, I would keep an eye on this h-file. If a rook ever lands on h7, it's going to be big trouble for this. I don't even want to call it a bishop. This almost bishop on h2.
And I learn a lot from you in moments like that because that wasn't on my radar of rook e7 to h7, but such a brilliant idea to try to unleash some vicious tactics down
Oh,
the h-file going for main attack.
Allowing
Can you
queen
just
h4.
Queen h4, bishop h6, rook e7, rook
Ay, ay,
h7,
ay.
like you said. And this is just up. This is Tata's wheelhouse right now.
Completely Tatov's wheelhouse, and Irina is stumbling and bumbling her way. There's too many threats, too many avenues of attack, and this has been Irina's undoing. It's these low time situations when her just sense of the position starts to evaporate. How bad is this? I think it just is dead lost. Black's pieces, like a pack of hungry wolves, converge on White's king side, on the queen, on the rook. Apologies. What does White
No
do?
apologies necessary. I think that White's pretty toast because bishop h6 threatens to win an exchange. Rook c3 played, bishop h6 anyway, and queen d3 I guess is available there, but you're pointing the arrow exactly where the rook belongs, and the bishop will move right back out of the way from h6, and the h file is overwhelmed.
But again, I'm banking on my experience in this position. Rook e7, rook h7 is, believe it or not, sort of a recurring theme in this line. Will Tatv be able to generate this concept? Because if you try to do it another way, if you play rook f6 here, you give White time to bring the knight over to e4 and then swing the queen at g3. And we know from yesterday's game how quickly things can turn around.
Oh, she played rook f6. Whoa, and look at
Levon!
d5. Levon just put another invisible move. We've seen that time and time again throughout the American Cup. That square was completely controlled by White's pieces. The queen and the pawn said, you can't go d5. And Levon says, I'm going to do it anyway. You're not the boss of me. That's a sick move.
That is a boss move indeed. And he's just trying to complicate matters. He's somehow up on time? Wasn't he down like 7 minutes in a worse position? Now he's forcing Fabi to calculate. The queen could get trapped in the center of the board. If you take with the pawn, you're allowing Black's bishop to open up. Both boards are about to explode here. And, oh my gosh, apparently, Robert, if I just may quickly show, if we transition our attention to Irina's board, knight e4, I'm going to put this on the board really quickly, and queen g3, Black can step back to h5, and riddle me this, unstoppable threat of knight d4 back to f5, separating the queen and bishop, winning on the spot.
Oof. And that's the most natural course of action. Knight e4 to queen g3, just hope that you can hold. But then you don't really have moves after that, even if knight f5 wasn't happening oh so quickly. So this is a great opportunity for Tatv. You see that Irina,
15
her time
seconds.
has been ticking. She plays knight back to f1, but Donna, there must be some kind of like, even rook f3 here tempts me. Like, can I just try to sacrifice my rook?
Okay. I mean, hey, you're preaching to the choir here. G takes f3, you want to take with a knight?
That's what I was thinking.
And then if I step my king to the side, king h1.
Bishop h6 to f4. I just thought I was going to try to get you there.
Where is this Robert Hess coming from? I mean, who is this guy?
I've been commentating with you this week, so suddenly I feel I can give up all the pieces.
Hey, now I want to play positionally with rook h6. By the way, let's compliment Irina's move knight f1. That is some tremendous restraint. It is the only way to stay in the game. to link the knight and the bishop, because unlike the queen, the knight is going to be a very hard piece to get to. Tatev now under a minute, and I see Levon's rook on c2. He's up a minute. Fabi, is he losing control of this game? Might he allow just like liquidation at the very least with rook d to d2?
Look at the moves we've seen. On the red board, Irina went knight f1. Fabi goes knight g1. And that was an excellent move. I think that you just get your knight to safety. You cover your back rank so there will never be any kind of checkmates back there. If rook d2 happens down here, you're trying to go after the g2 pawn. Rook f7.
Rook takes g2.
Is always going to be available. And then knight f3 maybe? I mean, what's going on there?
What a line. And what we're looking at here, I'm drawing with arrows. Rook takes g2 with threat and checkmate. But even in that scenario, the knight moves away to f3, and black might just hit an immediate dead end. I'm looking again to the left and to the red board and to the rook on f4, hitting the queen. Is Irina finally collapsing here with the knight coming back around to f5?
Oh, it's the worst position imaginable for Irina. Even if that rook on g3 weren't there and the bishop could take the rook on f4, you're getting mated on h1. You just have no moves whatsoever. And after knight f5, you can't move the rook.
And you are threatening knight takes g3, because after fg, fork, black blundered, no, rook takes f1. I said the knight is hard to get to. Apparently not. 8 seconds for Irina. She's got absolutely nothing she can do.
No. Irina is down to her final seconds, and she makes rook e2. Okay, she's just trying, but the rook on g3 can be captured for the reasons you mentioned. You give up a little fork, f takes g3, but rook takes f1, and then h2 falls. So, Danya, looks like Irina is losing the first game with white. Fabi, whoa! Do you see his last move?
Knight f3. Are you serious? Do you believe in miracles? What? Knight g5? That's a rook sack. It's not a back. And there's a mate threat on c8.
If the evaluation bar wasn't on the board, I would have thought he just blundered and wasn't looking at his rook on a1. But this is gorgeous tactical awareness.
Tatev has, of course, won after knight takes g3. Speaking of gorgeous tactical awareness, everything based on this capture on f1. A huge win with black, and the King's Indian lives to fight another day. Let's keep watching. Fabi's up a pawn. He's in the driver's seat, but it's bullet chess over in St. Louis.
And Fabi a little bit better at bullet chess than people give him credit for, but neither of these two want to be in a full-on scramble. Danya, white is up a pawn, so I have to like Fabi's position.
Indeed. I like Fabi's position as well, and I like it so much we're going to make the board even bigger for your viewing convenience, folks.
Ooh, as we're making it supersize. And you know what's, I think, worth noting, Don, is the b3 pawn is defended right now. People are like, what are you talking about? There's no piece defending it. If a rook or a queen takes on b3, knight g5 check is thrown in. So the queen on h3 is doing a great job, and even on g3, covering the b3 pawn.
The way white is stretching and maximizing the ability of the queen and knight, it really puts a lot of truth into, I think Capablanca was the first to notice how powerful this tandem is. Called it the most powerful tandem in chess, and now you see how much it can do, both tactically and defensively.
So you would say it creates tandemonium?
Oh my God. I'm in a state of pandemonium. I don't know what to say.
I actually just made you speechless. This is shocking.
I know. People are like, Naroditsky has nothing to say. That is probably a first in 29 years. And Fabi's got a lot to say.
Whoa.
And he's saying, I am going to run this pawn up the board. Yes.
Does he have knight g5 check in some positions? Like, is there going to be a checkmate on the h file with rook d8 at the end?
Dude, how do we always see this move? Like, every game, white plays h4 in the Italian at some point, and it magically turns out to be incredibly strong. Just like against Hikaru yesterday, you're absolutely right. This move is a threat. h5 is a threat. Levon's down to 15 seconds. I cannot see him pulling this one out.
Well, he did bring his queen back to c6, making sure the bishop is defended over there on f6. And I think, look at Fabi, rook d5. Ooh, that's one of those moves where you take the piece, you drop in d5, and you screw it in because that e4 pawn allows it to be an outpost.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. You just twist it in there. It's an eternal rook. But where is the final blow going to come from? You can huff and puff. Will you bring the house down here? And Fabi is trying to do just that, setting up the threat of rook d6. One threat after another after another. He is relentless here, Robert.
So far, it's been exceptional play in time trouble. You mentioned rook d6 going after the g6 pawn. I like that. He can also bring his first rook up to d3 if he wants to protect b3, or play b4 then b5. Get that pawn going at this point and use it as a decoy. It's not going to become a queen, but it's going to distract black's pieces.
Or at some
Whoa.
point, take a page out of Robert Hess's playbook. Play positionally, fight for the squares. h4, h5 might allow you to carve out the f5 square. Obviously, right now the threat is knight g5, queen to e8. The only move that I see.
And played, and look at Fabi. He's inching up. He forces the queen back. His queen goes up h5 again. Your point keeps coming up. It's meaningful. The queen has to come to f5 after that. Knight h4. White is taking over.
Taking a machete to these squares. And if black plays h5, the g5 square is his undoing. Otherwise, the f5 square might be the decisive one. Black has so many demons that he has to slay. 3 seconds to do it. Levon, valiant effort here. He's doing everything he can. Is he preparing rook to c6 in response to h5?
That works. That's incredible. And just trying to cover the 6. I think h6, g6 there, and the black king has to step back, and white's 2 pawns to the good. So it might not be enough.
But Fabi delays h5. I think now rook c6 becomes more appealing. Okay.
Actually, Diamond, there, h5, rook 6, queen takes g6 was winning. So you're right.
Oh,
h5
God.
looked good.
Fabi procrastinates, but rook f to d1, if you trade a pair of rooks, suddenly white's king might start feeling a little uncomfortable, and white's attack loses a little bit of its luster.
I think you do trade the rooks, though, and play h5. Like, you have to play that from the white side. Use the light squares against your opponent, only as a dark square bishop. You have a knight. Improve the location of your knight.
Don't burn too much time here for Fabi. This is not a critical decision. Something has caught his attention here, as he's down to 30 seconds himself. Rook f d1 would be automatic for me.
It's a really good move because h5 isn't really going anywhere. I don't care what the evaluation bar next to the board says. I see it just went down.
Robert, it went from point 8 to point 4. It's a blunder.
Well, if my blunders looked like this, I would be much, much higher rated. And the black rook did just swing on over to b7, Donna. The b4 pawn, it's a target, but after h5, I know it's a pawn sacrifice. I just feel like the white king, excuse me, the black king, it's feeling very dangerous, very airy in front of it.
I'm honestly stunned that Levon is currently in one piece, but again, it's the Smyslov approach. Make 40 threats, and eventually your opponent will collapse, unless he's Levon Aronian. Is Fabi eventually hitting a dead end here? Like rook g6, knight h4. There's so many tempting options, but will you find something where the pieces are cohesive and where they actually pose threats against the king?
The white knight should be on f5. I don't know how you get it there exactly because knight h4, the queen has to move. It takes a long time, and the black rook will start going after the white king. But knight h4 played by Fabi, Danya.
Queen e7.
Both play. Queen e7.
That's a fork. That's a fork, and it might force the queen trade. Black might be better there.
Queen c8 and knight f5. You got to save all your pieces.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Fabi
Just
did.
switcheroo me.
That's all Fabi. I'm just taking his moves as guidance.
You're fabulous, and so is black's rook, as it, again, carves its way into activity. Rook b1 check, probably useless. What's your move here? Back to b7 goes Levon.
Okay, so I think Fabi, he can choose to take on h5, just play rook e6. He takes that pawn on h5. So even material, Danya, and white's king does feel much safer, but it's not the safest.
Black is living on the edge, to say the least, at the edge of the precipice for essentially an eternity this game. Levon is close to holding this together. He's brought the reserves in. His king is safer than it's been in a while. But can Fabi find one more way to twist the knife? Maybe queen h4. He's preparing knight h4. Your idea.
You know what Fabi's upset about? This has been a rapid game rather than Blitz because 10 seconds of increment. Every move that's played, the players gain 10 seconds. If it was just 2 seconds, Levon would be in huge trouble.
Well, Fabi making incremental progress here. The immediate knight h4. Let's not comment on that move. And rook f6 giving up the h6 pawn. I'm grabbing that.
Yes, and this is where knights are better than bishops. I mean, in endgame, sometimes you can't win with just a bishop if you can't, go after your opponent's remaining pawns or allow your pawn to press forward. But the knight can jump from color complex to color complex. And Danya, this now looks great for white.
And in the event of a queen trade, if white can monopolize, queen f8, and Levon
F8.
finally collapses.
Oh,
Goodbye.
people have to understand defending that kind of position for so long. It's not just exhausting, it's borderline impossible. And Levon, he does drop the bishop in the game. He's going to be upset at himself, but I think he was determined to get that win.
Both players just showing ironclad willpower, right? Levon, the will to resist. He came oh so close. It was zeros on the eval bar. And apart from an excellent effort by Fabi, we see the danger of trusting the eval bar too much. That position was never equal, Robert. It
No.
wasn't.
If you get win expectancy there as the game is over, Fabiano takes it. If win expectancy was a thing on a chessboard, it would have been like, I don't know, 80% for Fabi. Just Black's king was in much worse shape, and White's knight was really annoying.
And apparently the only move to maintain actual equality, well, there were a couple actually, but rook to f1.
What?
What is even the point of this move? Ah, of course, it's king h7. Aha. And white simply
Actually?
has no way to make progress. It is.
So why does the rook need to be at f1 rather than, I don't know, the seventh rank?
It's prophylaxis. If you start with king h7, first of all, white will swing the knight around to f5 and automatically be a lot better. But
Yes.
what about rook like a7, you're asking? Ah,
Yeah.
I understood. So here white can do the repositioning after king h7. You can play knight h4, knight f5. With the rook on f1, it's like long-term prophylaxis because here, if we compare, black actually seizes the initiative by dropping the rook into f4. Queen h3, queen h5 forces the queen trade, and the weakness of the e4 pawn makes the position balanced.
Obviously, of course, we all saw that. I mean, that was just the easiest possible sequence of moves to find.
I don't think Levon has earned the right to play the second game, having missed this, frankly speaking.
I mean, these types of moves, right down here, Rook F1, they go against our natural inclinations because in a position like this, you want to keep your rook, your queen close to your king because white is swarming. There's a rook on d6, a knight on g6, a queen on h5. To play rook on f1 after the king escaped a check, come on, that's just not what humans do.
And if I rewind a little bit here, there was a moment where Fabi started losing his advantage. We were a little critical of his decision to play b4. h5 looked very tempting here. But apparently, according to the computer, rook takes c6 and then h5 would have maximized white's advantage. Really instructive game, a lot to analyze. And the players will have to save that for after the tournament. Right now, they need to get some rest and reset for, in Levon's case, a very daunting must-win for Irina Krush as well.
The big difference, I take it after the change of rooks in c6, is that the b4 pawn is harder to get to because in the game, it seemed that Levon just immediately picked off that pawn. His king still was not safe, but it's best for Fabiano to keep that extra pawn and start attacking. I guess I understand now where Fabiano's mistake came from.
And one last snapshot of Levon's amazing defense, the will to survive, d5, sensing the moment and striking at white's best protected square. Isn't that crazy how Levon played b5? White controls the b5 square with a bunch of pieces, and then later he strikes at the second square that white has monopolized with d5, opening up previously unseen levels of activity for his pieces, playing perfectly for so long, but that is the power of Fabi.
Yeah, these decisions B5 and D5 reminds me of either the what's that opening called? I was say the Blumenfeld. Is that what it's called? You where black like gives up the B pawn and then plays like E6 D5 and chiseling at white center.
It is called there's a Blumenfeld Scotch variation, and then there is the Blumenfeld encyclopedic knowledge. It's something like this, and then B5. Yes.
Right.
Takes.
Yeah,
takes.
that's what
Takes
that's what I'm
D5.
looking for.
What was Blumenfeld's first name?
I'm gonna guess like Ernest or something.
I think it was Benjamin.
Benjamin
If
Blumenfeld.
if I'm being Franklin, but let me double check.
There is a Benjamin Blumenfeld.
It is. It's not even telling me. Benjamin Blumenfeld, 1884 to 1947.
Ah.
Very interesting personality.
I'm just reading now the Wikipedia page, and The opening position can also be reached via the Banco Gambit. Possible continuations are whatever move, Khan versus Goldenov 1946, 5 bishop g5 from Vaganyan Grigoryan 1971, e4 or a4 Rubinstein Spielman 1922.
Oh
This
my
is a
God. These are some classic names right there you're reading, my friend.
yeah, just from the Wikipedia page for the Blumenfeld counter gambit.
My goodness. My goodness gracious. Okay, so I'm resizing the boards here, preparing for the second game. Keep talking. Keep on
I'm
going.
just Ernest Costa Camp. Yeah, I didn't know what Blumenfeld's first name was, but Danya now Levon, he gets the white pieces against Fabi. Tatev has the white pieces and draw odds because she won game one. Irina's gonna have to play some kind of Sicilian, and Levon, I don't know how you beat Fabi ever. I mean, Hikaru does it, but nobody else can seem to get through and beat Fabi in a must-win situation.
His opening preparation on full display this tournament. His form is back after that unfortunate Tata Steel performance. Great job in Weisenhaus, feeling confident. And speaking of feeling confident, I just want to shout out Alice Lee with that comeback yesterday against Tatev. I had the honor of playing some bullet chess with her yesterday, and that's all thanks to you, Robert. You mentioned that Alice Lee's playing bullet. So I knew I had to give her, I had to be the great influence that I am, but she has a rest day today, so it's allowed.
Yeah, I caught that. And I forgot that she had the day off today. So it's like, wow, this Alice is preparing for more intense chess. But no, Alice has the day off because she won the champions bracket, and that means she awaits the winner of Arena versus Tatev and Hikaru. He awaits the winner of Fabiano versus Levant.
I will be awaiting my camera to start behaving.
Well, oh,
Still crooked?
okay. It's yeah, it's still a bit crooked,
Okay.
but it's good. I think if you, oh, that was better, and now it's worse. But I'm also seeing it on a delay, and also because I have you on a video chat, what's
Yep.
on the video chat looks different than what I see on the stream.
I
So it's
totally get it. I'm making people dizzy on purpose. Just preparing them for the Blitz, you know. I think we're good
uh,
now. Or is it still crooked?
let's up for, well, that just moved elsewhere, but maybe if you sit, that would help us determine how crooked it is. Because I feel like you can't always notice how crooked something is if you're just sitting in front of it and people are just focusing on you. But
I'm actually not sure why it's so I apologize for yeah, now it's actually better. Now it's
yeah,
actually better.
there you go. But now because I was sitting, seeing, I can't speak, seated really low because when the scene change happened,
Hmm.
my head was cut off. So then I dipped in my seat and now I can sit back normally.
That's awesome. Great story.
Should I tell it again?
You should, because maybe I should show Smyslov Rudakovsky. I'm not sure when the next games are slated to begin. Is it possible to check?
Well, remember in previous days I've looked and then what I looked at never happened. So I don't.
Well, it'll rule out the time, the start time. Then you look at the time it says on the site, and then we'll know it's actually not that time.
Wait, Hikaru got a $15,000 bonus for winning the champions bracket.
Really?
So that blitz scramble against Fabi was worth 15K. That's pretty nice.
Hey, I mean, some of it comes out of his pockets. I'll be in St. Louis to collect. But may I quickly show the Smyslov Rudakovsky game as promised?
You certainly may. And the next game is supposed to be at 2 p.m. local, which is in 10 minutes, but it won't start then, I'm sure.
Yeah. Although yesterday, like the Blitz game started really quickly. So let me just resize very quickly. But okay. This is like the most Soviet of Soviet games, like 1945 USSR Championship. Smyslov is 24 years old when the game is played. And in this position, it actually came from a Cheveningen, but essentially transposed to a Najdorf structure. I'll let the chat figure out what white played. It's like the typical textbook idea. I can't even look at this because I've seen it so many times.
And I just got a raid from Anna Maya. So shout out to Anna Maya. You're not allowed to answer this question. I think, Donna, your question was meant for players not as esteemed and strong as Anamaya.
Oh, absolutely not. Anna Maya eats games like this for breakfast. She eats Smyslov for breakfast. And apparently, I eat my Hess sweeties for breakfast because I became you.
Wow. Are we becoming one and the same with all the puns that I've been using now?
Indeed. And I do realize it's a little bit raw the way I'm producing during the show. Stuff sometimes gets misaligned. But hey, it's our first tournament, and I don't think we've had any catastrophic failures.
Nope. But I'm looking at the recommendations. Anamaya is saying that she missed this commentary duo.
Takes, takes, and Pepega chess player with a non-Pepega suggestion. We are fighting for the d5 square. We are planting a knight on d5, and we are winning the game shortly thereafter.
Don, did you miss the part what I said before you showed the answer?
I did. Sorry, I was zoned out.
Oh yeah, Anamaya said she's missed this commentary duo.
Oh, I've missed it as well.
Oh, well, I had missed it until all the puns now are just they're endless, Danya, and they're in my head. Like every time you say something, I'm considering to make us some kind of pun.
I mean, you know how it is. It's the grass is always greener. I just remember like during the what was it, the Olympiad, I was commentating with Judith, and I made like my proudest pun. And I love Judith.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan. As you know, I've just got so much respect for the legends. You might remember this one. I think I said something like Luke McShane, who was playing for England.
Yeah.
We got news that he worked for Goldman Sachs. He's like often considered the world's strongest amateur. And I said, well, Luke McShane was working for Goldman Sachs, but his position Goldman sucks. And I was like, yeah, I'm like pounding my, oh yeah, this is a great pun. And Judith is just staring at the position. She's like, we got to analyze, boy. Like, I'm not about these puns. I'm about the moves.
That's usually how I am, but I'm happy for you. Does that count?
And that pun was gold, man.
Oh, goodness. Somebody save me.
Yeah, I mean, you can go shop at Saks Fifth Avenue while I commentate this next game. I can't help it. It's just my essence.
It just like naturally just I don't even know how it happens if people don't realize it that it's just true to your core because you'll be messaging me about something and somehow a message will then turn into a pun and then you'll spin it off into another pun and it's just incredible.
I do this with my friends here in Charlotte. You know, it makes life a little bit easier to live because if your first instinct isn't to laugh, then you're not doing it right. In my humble opinion.
That's true. I enjoy it. People also seem to enjoy it in the chat, but they say puns don't mix well with chess analysis. Not sure I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, the people who come in and then hear us talking about like basketball or football, oftentimes I used to get a little insecure and defensive when I'd see someone in the chat saying like when are they actually going to commentate the chess? Like, yap, yap, yap. Can we analyze some moves? And, now I'm just a little bit more comfortable because when you have a long show, you have to find that balance. You cannot exclusively talk about the moves. And there's no science here. It's an art.
Art. It can be a science, though. And also a question I see asked for you, which is a great one. I've never thought about this before. Do you make this many puns in Russian, too?
Great question. I do not, but I still make puns. Like I try when possible. So most recently, I did the Hans Dubov match with Shimanov, and I think I made maybe like a couple of puns, but there was one that I was really proud of because I combined like his last name, Shima, that's his nickname, with a Russian word, and it was like a natural, I didn't derail the conversation, but it is more rare, which is like a fascinating concept that you can speak a language fluently or just as fluently, but it's still harder for me to make those verbal connections than it is in English.
Oh, that makes perfect sense to me. There's actually an episode of Modern Family, which I never watched it like start to finish, but I would just catch episodes every now and then, and I just happened to have it on the background, and there was the episode where she's like, what's her name in the show? Sophia, I think. Oh, well, so sorry, the actress Sophia. What's her name? She's married to Jay. Gloria. Yeah, so she speaks Spanish, right? But she's like speaking to someone in Spanish. They're laughing all the time, and Jay gets jealous, and she's like, "I'm funny in Spanish. Like you don't get to see that because like it's English isn't her native language." So I get what you're saying about like how I know you obviously have spoken Russian your entire life, but it's always interesting to hear people discuss how different a personality can be depending on the language they're speaking.
Oh, absolutely. Your voice changes. For me, it's obviously harder to commentate. I'm very proud that I'm able to commentate in Russian fairly seamlessly, but I have less experience. I did it with Grishuk for the Carlson Nepo World Championship, and I was really happy with the way the Shimanov commentary turned out because, that final game where Dubov played G4, I listened back to it, and, at that time I was able to find the right words at the right time. But sometimes, I will blank on one particular word or I'll get a little nervous. But I love languages. It's just so fascinating how much of a direct impact they have on your perception of the world and how people just open up when they speak their native language.
For sure. And I think that you should be proud of your calls. Um, I don't know when this next round is going to start, so I don't know when we'll have the call for that. But call time allegedly is in 3 minutes.
Well, that'll be St. Louis Chess Club's call, not ours. And my call is to turn on the air conditioning because these games have been way too hot.
Well, you could also take your sweatshirt off if you're
But I love
overheated.
But I love commentating in a hoodie.
Why? What is it about the hoodie that makes it so magical?
Just makes it, kind of gives you that casual feel. And also, you can hide stockfish inside, so that's a nice bonus.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that I got nothing.
That caught you off guard, didn't it?
Yeah, had absolutely nothing as a response to that.
Yeah, it didn't warrant a response. We need a game here. We need to fill this awkward cringe silence with chess moves.
Should you show your game against Magnus from today?
You're flustered. Now I'm flustered, and you're gonna make me. You're gonna make me lose my tongue again. But okay, should I?
Yeah, well, let's go through that game. Look, your chat is so pumped for that.
You're so sweet, and also the games are about to begin, so I'm keeping an eye on the official broadcast. So we want to.
I have the page open. If the games populate, I'll let you know.
Is there a Freestyle Friday page? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Naroditsky. It was nothing special, I assure you. There were no explosive moments, but I was proud because I managed to more or less outplay him. So I was playing black in, freestyle chess. And quickly we got a structure that I was pretty familiar with from regular chess. He allowed the exchange on f3.
He was surprised that you went for that. I was listening to his stream.
Yeah, I was like, let me try to play positionally. We exchanged dark squared bishops. I was like, I have the d4 square. I can do this. And basically got the center, got the pressure on a2. Then I broke through. I was like, he's got 2 pawn islands. I got 1. And then I made the tactics work. Ultimately, I won this pawn using some more tactics. And, yep, I think they're sitting down.
That knight before tactic.
Yeah.
He thought he had rook d4, like when you won c2 and the queen on a1, like way back when. He was relying on rook d4 as like the way.
And he missed knight c2.
Like he just like I think didn't recognize like at first that the b3 knight could be captured at the end. And did you calculate after knight c2, rook c4, dc4 because he got worried about.
I did. That's why I paused.
Got it.
But queen c1. I'll get to that later. There are some really cool lines I still have to show. But speaking of really cool lines, now the games have begun. Let me pull up Fabi versus Aronian or Tatev's game, depending on which
Let's
one.
Let's go Fabi Aronian for now. Also, it's funny because you didn't even get to show the end of your game after all that. So,
maybe after the show?
Yeah. People got to earn it.
Yeah, we thank everybody for your support. Fasten your seatbelts. Levon, in a must-win scenario, this is the loser's bracket. The winner of this match will face Hikaru Nakamura. In Fabi's case, it will be a chance at revenge. But first, he needs to hold things together on the black side of Arosalimo.
And I think for people who don't have familiarity with this opening, they're like, this looks terrible for black. What is this? E6 and F6. You're not supposed to push that pawn. Your knight on F7. What's it doing there? But black does have the bishop pair, and this latest move, bishop B4, it's clearly Fabiano's book. He's prepared all the way up to this point. It's odd, though. Like, is black just trying to castle? And after that happens, is black going to go A5, A4, or what direction is Fabi taking this game?
Well, I think in chess coaching circles, the Arosalimo is very notorious. It's almost impossible to teach conceptually. It's inscrutable. Like, the structure makes no sense. The ideas are all over the place. The variations, like there's a million of them on every turn. But I'm actually looking to see where the novelty was. And this move C2, C4. This move C2, C4 was very rare. So if we rewind a little bit, after knight F7, bishop B2 is most common. C4 is a Morozzi bind approach. I already forgot what question you asked. Knight D4
wait.
to E2, Robert. None of this makes sense.
You said bishop B2 is most common? I'm seeing bishop A3.
Sorry, bishop A3, I misread. You're absolutely right.
Got it. Just checking. No, I was like, sometimes the database here isn't fully up to date. But it's a very strange opening, no matter what exact moves are played, because white has this Morozzi bind set up, but black's not in a Morozzi bind because Fabi's fighting completely for that d5 square himself. Bishop b7, pawn d5 can likely be played at some point.
And what's interesting, bishop b4 is the actual novelty. Bishop b7 was far more common. The idea is clear. You're making it hard for white to complete his development. The first time this move, bishop b7, was played, I'm just going to rewind a couple moves earlier, Yevgeny Sveshnikov was on the black side, 1994, against the German IM. So first of all, Sveshnikov didn't only play the Sveshnikov. I guess it was white who deviated. And yeah, that was a person. Like, when a line is called the Sveshnikov or the Rouser, those were people who were really good at chess. And I had the great honor of playing the late Yevgeny Sveshnikov a couple years ago in a Blitz tournament in Riga.
I didn't know that he was allowed to play anything besides the Sveshnikov, so it's good to see that he dabbled in other lines. As you said, wasn't exactly his choice. His opponent led him there. But in this game, black is about to be saddled with an isolated queen pawn. I think this is a good start for Levon. I understand that people would think, oh, if queen takes d5, the queen's come off. Isn't it just a draw? Absolutely not. I mean, Levon could play this without any risk, and Fabi will have to be as good at defense as he was against Levon a few days ago.
Would not rule out the move e6, e5. You've been pointing this out in various contexts where you basically use the pawn, or at least try to your advantage as an umbrella, then maybe park a knight on d6. Black's got a lot of potential energy. The bishop pair, if the light squared bishop can mobilize, there might be hell to pay. But if white can quickly get some attack going against the d5 pawn, I'm talking like e takes d5, black might not have time for any of that. So I'm kind of partial to e5 here.
It's funny because I have been talking about that, but I wasn't at all thinking about it in this position. But it makes perfect sense because if we cut the board in half, from the E through the H file, black will be up a pawn. And from A through D file, white will be up 2 pawns. But with a pair of bishops for only black, it feels like with an open board state, black may like this imbalance. So I'm with you, Danya. I think that E5 is a fantastic move. There's a reason why Fabi hasn't responded to the capture yet. It could be him deliberating if he should trade queens or not. But E5 would be, I think, a very fun continuation to this game.
This is a big early moment, right? Because his next decision truly changes the course of the game fundamentally. He does decide on ED, but the fact that he paused there, I think it makes it very clear Fabi is aware of the dynamism of this position. He's aware that he needs to get stuff done quickly, and A3 boots the bishop out of B4, paving the way for the knight to come out to C3. And Robert, sometimes you're not even in such a hurry to win the D5 pawn. Like, it might actually in some situations favor white, because it hamstrings the prospects for this light squared bishop.
How many times have we talked about one side being happier if they threw a pawn off the board. And as you're indicating, the light square bishop would be much stronger with that pawn gone. And it's an isolated queen pawn. Aaron Nimzovich would say you blockade it with a knight. There's a knight on e2. So the knight from b1 will go out to c3. The knight from e2 will step forward to d4. And we can see those knights start getting active and strong. But black will have ideas of his own, right? Down to bishop back to d6, I would play to aim towards the white king side. And then, bishop b7. I don't exactly know what plan to opt for from the black side, but the pieces will at least be on safe squares.
Well, let me tell you what plan not to opt for. Queen takes d5, the Botez plan after bishop takes h2. And I don't think Levon was planning on this. Wow, he saw that. Can you believe the foresight on the Super GM's brain? Wow, wow, wow.
What a star. What a legend Levon is. In all seriousness, he is that. He is an absolute legend. Has the fourth highest chess rating at his peak of all time. And everyone, respects him. You saw the lie detector episode with Levon and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And Maxime, you could see, he's like, no, what you've accomplished is just tremendous. So here in this position for Levon, I don't know how much he has accomplished. He can get his knight to d4. That seems great. And the b5 jump, the e6 square, the f5 square. The knights are tricky pieces, but Fabi also seems to be stabilizing. And what do you make of this obscure move?
That is vintage Levon, right? From his very early years, he had this flair for the dramatic, flair for these creative decisions, even in positions that don't seem to lend themselves to those decisions. Sometimes it backfires. Sometimes he goes too far. But when it works beautifully. And he's trying to go rook d2. And at that point, knight takes d5 will, essentially result in open season against black's queen. So he is trying to win the d5 pawn. He's just trying to do it in such a way that he's ready for the center to open up.
I like it. It's a good idea. At the very least, it causes confusion. And Levon has more time than he started with. I don't truly believe he's in preparation anymore. But I think he understands that the first game, he was the one lower on time and in some trouble. He's trying to use the clock to his advantage.
Can you chuck this pawn away? Just go d4 before it's too late, before a rook has landed on d2?
Okay, so d4, let's say knight takes...
Bishop h2?
Bishop h2. You are a very, very tricky man.
Thank you. I mean, classic bush league by Daniel. Loose pieces drop off, and now you win the pawn back with bishop takes h2, and you get the ice skater right triangle.
That's actually a very nice tactic to spot. So after d4, white needs to take on d4 with something else. He did it, I guess, a moot point. Rook to e8 was played instead. I think it's a perfectly reasonable decision.
Yeah, I mean, he activates his rook. He keeps his options open. And in response to rook d2, I also realized a3 might fall. There might be an exchange sacrifice on e3. It feels like Levon doesn't have enough targets, right? There's the d5 pawn. If he had one other target, maybe if, I don't know, the black king were a little bit weaker, his play would be a little bit more impactful. I feel like he just doesn't have enough purchase right now on the position. And with the center as open as it is, Robert, things could come off the board in a heartbeat. And before you know it, you might just not have any winning chances.
But I almost blundered again. I was saying, what about knight d4? But then bishop takes h2 check. An idea we've already talked about. It rears its ugly head. So knight to d4 not available right now. Maybe knight b5. Does that make sense? Just to avoid all these tactics with the loose knight on c3, and you could choose which knight goes up to d4.
But what if I meet that with bishop a6?
Oof, you're so frustrating. Wait, I want to somehow pester you, but you're just doing all the pestering.
I mean, I live to annoy you. Hey, you should know that by now. God, black's position. It's so crazy how optically white's got everything on the right spots, but I can't see a move.
Bishop a6 is very frustrating. I'm trying to figure out where white feels most confident. Like if the knight takes d6, there's the presence of opposite colored bishops, which just makes someone feel bad when they have to win the game, but there is still plenty of game left ahead.
And there might be not a lot of game left ahead in Irina's game because a lot of pieces are coming off there. She needs to beat Tatev with black. And I can show that quickly. There's not much going on. I can also go to our two-board view momentarily, but I'm pretty skeptical. The many-time U.S. champion, U.S. women's champion, might be on her way out if Tatev can hold it together.
let's show that game. This one seems to be paused for now as Levon is trying to figure out the best way forward. And I think that for Tatev and Irina, honestly, I don't hate Irina's position. And I know that sounds odd because of how many pieces have been traded. And, when one side needs a draw, trading pieces sounds like a good thing. But above my head, the board in red, like let's say the bishop takes the bishop on c6, the pawn takes back. There's like this pawn structure that's unusual. And something feels like black will get a rook to d8 and up to d5, and maybe then can play for a little something.
As I was about to take and show this, Tatev hijacked the bishop and took on c6 herself, which is just kind of interesting, like the mouse flip yesterday. Now, normally,
That was funny.
under circumstances where she isn't satisfied with the draw, I would be playing for f5, like short castles. It's very Tatev style. Just shove that pawn through. And this is something we've talked about. You don't want to change your approach too much just because the circumstances, the cards have fallen a particular way. That is the best recipe for immediate fiasco. If you're Tatev, play like you would normally play. If that means going f5, then play for f5.
Though against Carissa, she played how she'd normally play, was overextending and got herself into a great deal of trouble early on. So I feel like you can second guess yourself. And Danya, I see a comment, I see it myself, that on the board in blue, the clock does not appear to be ticking. So maybe a little gentle refresh is needed there.
Apologies for that.
Oh,
Now,
you're all good.
I know the viewer was a little ticked off by that.
Don't make me clock you.
Oh my god. I watch yourself.
Ugh.
Okay, let's just Rolex with the game, okay?
I've got to hand it to you. All these watch jokes are pretty good.
I mean, they're as are my producing skills. They're pretty high patek.
I'm done. I'm just done. Don't make me flip you off.
Oh my god. Okay, well when we play our next round of Tag Hewer, you're it. I'll make sure to do just that.
Oh goodness. Oh my goodness.
Fabi, in the
I'm
meantime,
done
he made a move auto, Queen D7.
Oh, Queen D7. Okay. And I think some people would forget that Knight takes D5 is still not available because even though there's no pawn on H2 that can be captured, it's all about the check on H2, not the capture on that square. So White would lose his queen if this were to happen.
Yep. Knight D5, Bishop D5. But important to keep an eye on that. Of course, King H1 here would not just go from the frying pan into the fire. It would go from the frying pan into, the biggest inferno you can imagine, and then go straight into elimination. D4, such an instructive example, Robert, of trying to avoid one problem and tunnel visioning your way into another.
Yeah, that would just be
Zoop.
just yeah, a horrendous end to the game. So that's annoying for Levon is that he can't even step away to create the threat of capture on d5, and he might need to bring his rook to d2. But we've already been talking about this. The a3 pawn is then hanging, not ideal. I think that Fabi has done everything you could ask for.
This position is infuriating. And like the eval bar is at zeros. Even it's done with this position. Like I don't even want to evaluate it because I don't know what white should do. Fabi has like seemingly an infinite supply of, let's call them useful moves, such as rook ac8. I mean, is a7 a pawn that we need to worry about if you're Fabi?
I'm still thinking about your d4 idea. Like at some moment, that's not going to be pleasant for white to deal with. So I don't know if an a8 rook move is needed here, but d4 is now tempting me ever since you brought it up.
D4 is good. The computer's top choice is rook ac8. So there is presumably some response to bishop a7. Just intuitively, it feels like black has a million options there. Even the knight coming into g5, I would keep a close eye on the prospect of a sack on h3 in the future.
That's actually a fantastic sequence, right? The bishop offside on a7, you win a pawn. Good for you. I'm going to win your king. So, Danya, on the board above your head, I'm agreeing that Fabi is doing very well with the black pieces. On the board above my head, I think that Irina can play on. I mean, there's no risk in her position. She is going to try and put a rook on d5, I would imagine.
Hmm.
And Tatev is trying to trade off pawns. She's trying to get active, play pawn to c3. But is it enough? Will that be helpful in her defensive task? I think it should be. But Black's king does feel safer because of where the pawns are on the king side.
I love that explanation, but I think it's a little over my head. Um,
It's actually over mine.
oh, it actually is, isn't it? Oh my gosh, even that failed. So the rook coming to d5 is El Clasico, right? Like this square is just screaming out for a rook to land on it because there is no knight, or even better, a light squared bishop. Bishop e7 to d5 would be a dream. Your point is well taken. If the bishops came off, then I think the position stabilizes. White doesn't have to worry. As long as Irina keeps one pair of minor pieces on the board, there is still some intrigue. And maybe Tatev, yeah, c4 at the right moment. But anytime you push your pawns, you create more weaknesses. So she must, above all else, keep her composure. That is what was missing yesterday against Alice Lee.
And I think there's a nuance here, a wrinkle, that rook f to d8 would be my preference instead of rook a to d8. And some people might be confused by that because they're taught to bring their rooks to the center. The e file is useless here. So, of course, the f8 rook won't go there. But if white does play c3, that a8 rook will probably slide to b8 with a semi-open file. So just a small little detail here, but these small details can be of the utmost importance depending on the position.
Well, you know where the devil resides. That's such a great point, right? Yeah, your instinct rook AD. Let's keep your f8 rook in case. In case of what? Nothing is going to happen on the king side. The theater of action is on the queen side. And once again, putting a rook on the closed file in anticipation of that file opening up. Speaking of anticipation, I'm anticipating some sort of explosion in the Levon game. I don't love a5. I feel like that's a little bit materialistic. On the other hand, Levon hasn't shown a cohesive plan, so Fabi kind of gently tossing the ball across the court saying, yeah, do something with it.
Yeah, Fabi just didn't want to give up a pawn, and when he just needs a draw with the black pieces, he probably wants to keep as few imbalances as possible. So you're pointing out the a pawn pushes for white, the b4 score is very valuable. Maybe knight d4 now that there's no pawn h2 is an option
Look at
because
that timing.
oh, yeah, well, I'm watching on the stream now, so I didn't catch it until it happened. But this is starting to look like at least the outline of a position that Levon could hope for an advantage from.
That's why I was, yammering for rook ac8 because it prevented knight e to d4 and it hit white where it hurts on the c3 knight, that undefended knight. And now rook ac8, it loses some of its effectiveness. Maybe Fabi still plays it. I think that's not unlikely. But I don't know, knight b5, queen d2. If white can kind of untangle a little bit, the positional assets that we've been praising for a while, that isolated pawn on d5, the blockader on d4, eventually that should make its presence felt, as could, Robert, you like to point this out, the 2-on-1, maybe in some distant future that could be an outside passer.
Definitely, especially if the bishop remains on b7, because if white can get that pawn from b3 to b5, that bishop looks completely useless. That's why we blockade isolated queen pawns. The light square bishop is a purely defensive piece for black, and Danya maybe d4 that was called for and would have made black at least feel like there are healthier moves each and every turn. So Fabi is worse, and I see, Danya, your arrow on the board above my head with rook a to b8. I actually think it's a very clever move to include now. I was, saw about rook f d8 first, but rook a to b8 in some ways makes c3 far less attractive from the white side and might freeze Tatev in her place.
Well spotted. Rook a8 prophylactic measures. Irina investing some time in this decision, and not to make people's heads swivel back and forth, but I do want to just clarify, if we rewind on Fabi's board, if he had played rook ac8, and I am checking with the computer here in the interest of time, bishop takes a7, runs into many things, d4 is devastating. Look at this line, Robert, knight g5, and it's like +3. White can resign. So
Wow.
For instance, if the bishop drops back, bang, queen takes h3. Why is this so good? Because there's 8 gazillion threats. And, okay, knight f4, for instance, one bishop gives itself up, the other bishop opens up, and that is the power of the bishop pair. It's game over. And if white plays knight takes d5, the best move is knight f3 check. Elementary, my dear Watson. Take on h3. zig, zag, fork, win. And this would have put Fabi through to the losers final. Or what is the next stage called? The grand final?
Yeah, the grand final. That's right.
Who cares? He went A5, and now the landscape of the position changes entirely.
Yeah, Levon is definitely happy about how the last few moves have gone. The fact that he was able to, get his rook to E1, his A2 rook can still slide on over to say D2. He's feeling like, all right, I can in fact win this position. And Black has a natural move like knight to E5 at some moment, but the knight has nowhere to go from there. So the B3 pawn covers C4. So I would actually consider, Danya, the move A4 for Black. I'm not sure if it works right now, but you know me, I'm all about those squares. That if I want that knight to c4, starting with a4 may be the name of the game, but maybe white pushes forward instead of taking it right away, and the a4 pawn may drop later, and white gets a healthy pawn structure.
All pawns and a lot of hope there for white. Elementary, my dear Watts, I should have probably said. And some harmony indeed among white's ranks. It's crazy, Robert. We talk about this in abstract terms, how these small decisions at the grandmaster level can subtly influence the course of the game. To me, and I don't have the retrospective view of how this game finishes, but to me it seems like a5, right? If Levon pulls this game out on demand, this will be one of the key moments that is likely to be missed by, by the corners and the geniuses who seem to know exactly what the mistakes were and how they would have improved in Fabi's shoes. But the decision to play a5 just seems not in the spirit of the position.
It was a difficult moment because the a7 pawn was loose. We understand now that it couldn't have been easily captured. And a6 then, instead of a5, shouldn't you cover the b5 square? If only the pawn were on a6, that would be true. But I think Fabi wanted to leave the a6 square open for his bishop. He says that bishop on b7, it's staring at its own pawn. It's not useful. A bishop on a6 can be more helpful. But the pawn structure, Danya, that's what this position is about. I know usually it's overrated. Here it actually dictates the advantage.
And the bishop retreats to f8, Fabi adopting a more defensive posture. Still no concrete targets, right? That is the one major obstacle for white. He's got beautifully placed knights. They're on well-protected squares, textbook blockade of the IQP. What are you going to attack, right? Good pieces don't win games. Good moves win games. You need to identify a weakness. Is it the a5 pawn? Is he going to go bishop d2, or is he going to play in the center or on the king side?
I think that Black is in some serious danger because strategically, Black is, I don't want to say lost, but it's terrible. So for example, Don, I think we can just force the issue here. Let's say bishop b4 is played and white responds with bishop to d2, and these pieces start coming off. That bishop on b7 is awful. The knight on f7 isn't really helping out. And you were just showing the famous Smyslov game, exactly, where it's going to be a very strong knight on d4 against a weak bishop on b7. And that's not at all what Fabiano would want.
It's crazy how similarly our brain cell can work. Like the moment you thought about the Smyslov game, and my mind was like, wait, we just looked at Smyslov-Rudakovsky. Can't make this stuff up. Fabi clearly looked at Smyslov-Rudakovsky. He's like, I'm not Joseph Rudakovsky. I'm Fabiano-Caruana. Commentators, take notice.
Yeah, but he may be Fabiano-Caruana. Levon Aronian is saying, I'm Levon Aronian. That a5 pawn is mine. And white just looks better here. It's a healthy plus now. Black's pieces are not ideally placed. So knight d6, that's what you want to play. But Fabi already showed that he doesn't want to give up his a5 or before an a7 pawn, now an a5 pawn. So knight d6 is a hard move to justify given the recent history.
Well, in my coach's sage words, there are no bad bishops. There are only bad players. And we see that that's true. Every bishop can be maximized. But amazing. Nothing escapes Levon's eagle eye, right? The action was in the center. Suddenly, boom. He switches his gaze to the queen side, to this immobilized pawn on a5. And bishop b4, to me, is out of the question as well. You might save the pawn, but you're not going to save the position from a strategic standpoint.
No, bishop b4 is not what the doctor ordered here. White would just take that off and then go after the b4 pawn, and there's an outside pass pawn for white anyway. So Fabi, knight e5, knight d6. Doesn't look good at all.
Wow. It's almost +1. The engine assessment here +1. Black has to part ways with the A pawn, according to the computer, and even that will not grant you nearly sufficient counterplay. But this was Fabi's own creation. Like, just not playing rook AC8. Crazy. One tempo, one moment like that, it sends the entire game into a tailspin. Can he find one more comeback in himself to avoid another round of Blitz?
He's gonna have to dig deep. And you look at the time, it's 20 minutes and almost 20 and a half minutes, and then it's 11 minutes and change for Fabiano-Caruana. So time is not helping him. The position, not good. But Dane, giving up the A pawn, how easy is it for white to convert from there?
It depends entirely on whether black can whip up kingside counterplay. If white just literally takes on A5, if white trades the second pair of rooks, it's pretty straightforward. We all love connected passers. If black can gin up some counterplay with like knight e5, knight g5, get this dark squared bishop back into the game, then the situation will still be balanced at a knife's edge.
A knight's edge, even.
Oh,
And I'm curious,
stop it.
who is chat rooting for? Because I know Fabi has a lot of fans. Levon does as well. On the board above my head, Irina and Tatev, they have their fair share of fans. So I'm curious, are people rooting for anyone? Obviously, everyone's rooting for good chess. And so I see Levon, the underdog. Those are the comments. And yeah, it's going to be a mix, I'm sure.
A trivia question.
Yes.
There's only one of these four players currently on display whom I have not faced in a classical OTB game. Which one is it?
So I know you faced Fabi.
Oh.
I am going to assume. Ooh, this is a tough question. See, I feel like the others play in the U.S., throughout your whole life. So Levant could be the odd one out, but then maybe it's a trick question for some reason you haven't played Irina Crush.
It is actually Levon Aronian. Great logic. I played Irina once at the Castle Chess Grand Prix 2016. I played Tatev in 2013 in the Bay Area International. And of course, Fabi I played twice. I had the great honor of facing him in 2 U.S. championships. Levon Aronian I only faced in online rapid. And in Blitz at the last year American Cup.
See, I figured it was going to be Levon, but then I thought you were tricking me. And Irina would be the most likely person you would have played, but then that's why I thought you were going to get me. But right now it looks like Levon is going to get Fabi because the A5 pawn is gone. White is up one. The D5 pawn's still weak, and for Fabi, Danya, is he going to take this knight on D4? If you gave black a free turn, is bishop takes D4 the idea?
Well, if you're doing it with closed eyes and clenched teeth, right? You're doing it because you have to, not because you want to. And as a fun tidbit, Robert, just to end that thread, I've played 4 games that I just referenced. One with Tatev, one with Irina, 2 with Fabi. All 4 with the black pieces, funnily enough.
You do not get the first move. Definitely not.
Yeah, it's just like getting double black against Magnus and then MVL. That never happened, right? Oh, wait. Just this morning. Okay, back to the game at hand. Fabi kind of has the type of comeback that Levon almost made in the last game, where it's a long-term advantage. The nature of the advantage is different, right? Because in the last game, Fabi was sort of tactically better. His pieces were more active. Here, he's down a pawn, but his pieces are actually quite decently placed.
It's true. The improvement there is obvious that the worst piece is now off the board, so he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. And for Levon, he's going to have to continuously think, is a trade of dark sword bishop for knight allowing black to make a draw because of the opposite colored bishops? There's so much life left in the position that you can't just circle a result. But that's the concern that goes through a player's mind is bishop takes d4 something to actually worry about?
And let me tell you another thing to worry about. If you push b4 prematurely, that's just unthinkable because it hands over this massive outpost on c4. How do you get around that problem, Robert? Do you go rook a to d2? Sorry, r to d2? You actually go r to d2, but
r to d2
chess.
So you're saying You're saying rook d2, bishop f4, rook c2. You're just trying to induce the bishop to f4.
I'm trying to swing the rook from the northwest passage over to the right side of the 45-degree longitude latitude, and then once the diagonal piece slides and hops over, doing the knight jump to f4, then I will go to c2. Sorry.
I understood perfectly. I got that all. But bishop f4 is what you're indicating. But does it help Levon? So, like, bishop f4, rook c2, you're just saying to everybody that the rook trade should be good for white. And the rook trade wasn't easily available with the bishop on e5 staring at that knight on d4. So, bishop f4 in that way feels less appealing than it otherwise would.
Yeah, great observation. Question from the chat. I faced Hikaru twice in classical, one loss in 2015 and one draw in 2017, both U.S. championships. So I've been around. I did once play over the board classical chess. Yes, yes. As Han says, yes, 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 yes. So bishop f4, rook c2, rook e8. I'm trying to make heads or tails of that, and it occurs to me then that queen g4 becomes a really nasty prospect because this bishop on a5, it guards the back rank square on e1.
I thought you just blundered checkmate on the first rank. So thank you for reminding the audience. I definitely, of course I saw the bishop on a5 stop mate, but no, it's an important detail.
Never faced Hans in classical. And let me put this on the board. Bishop f4, such a tempting move. Offer the trade. Black says no. Offer the trade. Black has to say yes. Apparently the computer is just like swinging. Maybe it's because of the trade followed by like a rook to e4.
And then the d pawn starts rolling.
It is indeed. That is the computer line, and white's advantage would be minimized. So here the move, actually. You won't believe it. Bishop d2. Come on.
It's such an awkward looking move, but it does make sense. The bishop did its part by winning the a5 pawn. And just looking at that position, the bishop on e3 does look super nice there, well placed. So I get bishop d2. It's just hard to sort of spot in advance.
It's like flying through an airport that you would never get off and explore the city. Like recently I had a flight, and I was sitting next to the flight attendant in an exit row, and he was chatting to the fellow passenger, and he's like, well, are you calling Charlotte home? Because like, no, I'm flying to a civilized city. And I was just like sitting there. Bishop d2, just a transit point to a lovely square on e3. Fabi plays bishop f4. It is on the board, ladies and gentlemen.
Uh-oh. I think that Levon's going to find that sequence of rook c2, bishop d2. It feels like a very Aronian type of regrouping.
And wait, what just happened? Are they...
Robbie allowed the rook trade.
So he went back to e5. Obviously, I was like, who is repeating? It's not Aronian.
It's Fabi. He's allowing the trade of rooks, which I thought that white really wanted. So, Donnie, this seems maybe not advisable.
There's a weird synchrony going on between the two boards. On the orange board, a rook trade also possible as Crush fights for control of the d-file, but total liquidation is going to end any remaining winning chances she might have. And Fabi, that is a bold decision indeed, as with every trade, the power of these passers increases.
I feel like for Irina, she still has chances to win this game because the only open file is the D file, and she's about to claim that. And the fact that the pawns are on f4 and e5, the board above my head, I do feel like that gives black some chances going forward. And if the bishops get traded now with black doubling rooks in the d file, I don't know, I get the sense that Irina can really press this, especially with her lead on the clock.
Definitely. If she gets the d-file, there's some tactics that could stem from, the a7, g1 diagonal being weak, even f7, f6 in some positions, exposing the f4 pawn. There is a little meat on the bone. Tatev has to be careful, especially given the psychological effect, right, that yesterday's game might produce on her. She needs to avoid that here we go again mode and keep her composure. And so does Levon. He must win on demand. He must convert this advantage. Almost +2 here, Robert. That is a pretty lofty assessment. I don't think there's anything like tactical. Maybe just go knight f3. But these connected passers, they are going to start inching up the board momentarily.
Knight f3, completely reasonable move over there. The b4, b5 push that you're indicating, that will be annoying for black to deal with. And then I'm looking at the board above my head, and maybe I overstated a bit because can Tatev play king f2, king e2, and then just trade literally everything down the d file?
Well, it's scary to play because, and you are the Tatev Whisperer. There is no Tatev without Hess, and there is no winning chances without any pieces, says Tatv Abrahamian. Maybe c5 and like queen b7, but it seems like black is playing for one move threats at that point.
Because the king can just go back between e2 and f2, and at some point you are going to take on d7. I actually think that there's no way for black to avoid that, right?
Mm-hmm. There is no way for black to avoid that. And this is the problem when there's only one open file. Like, the defending side can focus all her efforts on keeping it under lock and key. And what's going on with my computer? Okay, now we're good again. Fabi, in the meantime, finally played the move d4. We were pining for him to do that for so many moves. Is that a trap? Knight d4. Is there queen c5?
There definitely is queen c5 because the bishop on a5 is under attack, the knight on d4 is under attack, and there's no way for them to defend each other.
So what does Levon do? Does he get down to business, roll up his sleeves? Scary to play b4 when black can access the c4 square.
Oh, and the fact that it's okay, this is important, I think. Knight takes d4,
Sure.
queen c5, knight e6, queen takes a5. White would be winning with queen d7 if it weren't for the fact that the white king is getting checkmated back there.
It's a double mate threat. So many instructive themes, Robert, including the fact that just because you play h3 doesn't mean that you're immune to back rank mate. You made a Luft square. Black is controlling it. Otherwise, indeed, white has these two simultaneous mate threats. Okay, so what about b4? Let's say that Levon plays it. What is going to be Fabi's response? Maybe even queen to c3?
Just to freeze white's pawns?
And now what?
Was that rhetorical, I hope? Because I'm struggling to come up with a plan.
My brain is like mush after this Freestyle Friday. I'll be honest. Like, my calculation is not up to my, admittedly fairly low standards. I wouldn't be able to properly assess knight takes c5. Like, I have no idea who this benefits, but somehow it's so annoying that you can't play b5. It's like a reverse pin.
Yeah, the bishop on a5 is not where it needs to be at all.
It's like, I'm pinning you. No, I'm pinning you, says the queen. Let's get the hierarchy straight here. And that doesn't mean white can't play b5 at some point anyway. A lot to talk about here, but that will remain behind the scenes because bishop b6 is on the board.
Okay, but d3 is automatic now. Your pawn on d4 is seriously under fire. So d3, queen c2 to follow. So here's my question for you, Danya. Because this is what both Fabi and Levon have to assess. Let's say d3 is played, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then queen c2 is the follow-up. But we'll imagine knight takes e5 is thrown in there as well. Do you get where I'm going with this? The opposite colored bishop ending, is that winning for white, or is black holding that?
I've done a lot of lessons on that. It's such an important question because the kryptonite, right, the magic bullet that allows you to override the drawing tendencies of opposite colored bishop enemies is often connected passers because they can break down a blockade. So it's always predicated on whether the bishop can set up a blockade or if the pawns are able to inch forward, often with the support of the king. I'd like to switch over to the one board view, if that's okay with you. I'm keeping an eye on the Tatev game, but I feel like Fabi's game is going to hit the climax first. We do see Irina playing f6, trying everything that she can, but let's bring up this board just so we can move some pieces. So bishop b6, Fabi's still thinking. You're asking what happens if takes, and like b4?
Yeah, and queen c2. Like, I'm just trying to understand, is this going to be a winning bishop and pawn endgame for white? It's opposite colored bishops, which we often think must be a draw. And the white king is cut off for now. The black king will try to scurry on over. The c2 pawn is the best pawn of all. What do you make of this?
I think it's a draw because what I was talking about is if black can play bishop b3 and step back, you've got the blockade. As long as you prevent white's king from getting to c5, you're good. So, like, that's why if white's pawns were already on b6 and a6, it would be winning. So we'll see. d3 on the board, knight e5 on the board. Robert, great call as usual. We might get this endgame.
There's so much to assess there. I guess white can start with bishop e3 here, just understanding that. Okay, so queen c2 was a threat. So bishop e3 says, you play queen c2, my queen got to g4, and it's the black king that's in some danger.
In this game, I don't think likely to be decided on the clock for once. I think it's likely to be decided by competing understanding. Which player has the better understanding of the attacking and defensive strategies here? Will Fabi go for the queen trade? Will he try to set up counterplay against white's g2 pawn? How do you assess the winning chances here? Is it 50-50? Is it something else?
Levon's a heavy favorite. Really heavy favorite. I'm looking at the clock as well, right? Fabi is down over 6 minutes, and he barely has over 6 minutes himself. For Levon, there's so many easy ideas. Pawn to b4, queen to h5, queen to f3. And for Fabi, every single turn is like, what next? Am I going to attack anything? Don't see how that's possible. d3 is strength, but that means the bishop on a6 is stuck. So I think it's just much easier to play for Levon.
Not unlike the previous game, right? There's a threat, a new set of problems every move. And the queen trade might be irrelevant because as Fabi goes queen c6, if he had gone queen c2, queen h5 was a devastating, to my eyes, double attack on the e8 square and the e5 pawn. So Fabi keeps his queen closer to the vest. He makes contact with g2, setting up the possibility of bishop b7. And we need to fasten our seatbelts because this is going to be a really exciting finale.
Such a fascinating position. And I like what you're pointing out, bishop b7 threatening checkmate in one, but also inducing the move f3 in some positions. You know, if white does play f3, I think some people in the audience are taught, or they think that if my opponent has a bishop, I should shut down that diagonal. But playing f3 kind of walks into e4 ideas where black's trying to trade off more pawns and protect his own passed pawn. So b4 played, why not push the passer? Here we go, Danya. Queen g4 feels like the move for Levon right now. But the queen on g4, where does it go from that square?
Queens are notoriously fickle defenders, so h7, h5 would be a nasty little deflection. Black cannot take on a4 here. Great call, Robert, because of queen e6. And it's not mate, but it looks like white's creating way too many threats there. So the queen on c6 is likely to remain rooted to that square. If I was playing, bullet game h5, you just play this move first and then think later.
Whoa, though that line you're just talking about, queen a4, right? Like queen e6 to f7 or e7. Black has queen a8 at the end, covering everything.
Whoa. So you're going to have to acquiesce to queen takes e5, I guess.
But that looks very good because the g7 pawn is such a tender point.
Precisely. So white basically switches his focal point from the connected passers. He gives one of them up and transitions to a direct attack.
Wait, speaking of direct attack, queen a4, bishop h6?
Queen a1 and e4? Oh my god.
Then
queen e6, yeah?
Yeah, queen e6 and bishop e3 back even, I think.
Oh, that is I got to show that. So we're talking about queen a4, ladies and gentlemen. Queen e6 was not the move. Robert proposes bishop h6. Okay, queen a1. If g6, then queen e6 is made in a couple. So black can defend like this. But now the back rank is even more exposed, and the retreating move. Absolutely lovely, Robert, because if g6, whoop, bishop swings back to h6, and it's time to resign.
And you gave us a good old Chris Berman impersonation. Love that. So
I would actually go bishop f4 so that you have a fork here. Sorry, continue.
No, you're showing the important lines. So that means that the a4 pawn is untouchable. And I think in general, I just kind of trust Levon in these positions. He's not just going to hang a4. And yes, all the best players in the world blunder. Magnus Carlsen, Levon, Fabi, Hikaru, doesn't matter. They make mistakes. They're human. But I didn't think that he was blundering his advantage away this quickly.
I can swear I'm having some deja vu. Whether Tata Steel or the Olympiad, there was a recent endgame queen plus opposite colored bishops. One side is up a pawn. That was strikingly similar. I'll have to track it down. And Fabi is trying to track down the white queen. You called it, Robert. every move he has to like generate a new idea and now adapt to a new set of circumstances. No longer does white have connected passers, but no longer does black have the privilege of king safety.
So tough to assess these positions. I'm looking away because I'm just trying to figure out how to articulate this. Black is happy because there are no connected passers that can operate together. White is happy because black's best pawn is gone, and the e5 pawn is the target. If black is ever to go e4, that seems smart because you're going to protect your pawn that's otherwise on a dark square and potentially lose. But your bishop on b7 is an unhappy piece. So these are the trade-offs that are difficult to assess. And I really like Fabio's move king to g8. I mean, I think you just had to get out of check in this manner. Queen c6 comes next, and you want to induce white to play f3, and only then will black play e4 in response.
And I'm happy because I get to commentate this endgame with and learn from the great Robert Hess. So Fabi might be the only unhappy one in general at the defensive task that awaits him. The one additional encouraging factor, queen trades probably favor black at this point, because with a single pawn, it's not going to be a factor when it comes to forced promotion. And as long as you don't get a scenario where white's king is close to the queen side, which is not going to happen, black is essentially down for a queen trade as long as he doesn't lose a second pawn, because then you're going to get trousers.
Although maybe you could lose the e5 pawn, I'm saying with no confidence whatsoever.
I don't think so. Intuitively feels like two extra pawns should be enough here, even with the queen swapped.
Yeah, I think the h5 pawn queen swap and h5 pawn gone. It's just very simple, right? White just gets a second outside pass pawn immediately. I'm wondering though if the e5 pawn drops, if it's you can keep white stuck for a while, especially because the bishop is hitting some of white's weak points. It's never easy to assess these positions.
It's amorphous. It's absolutely undefined. You can't really calculate your way. And making a choice here for either side is so difficult, right? Every move has a concession. I think that's what you're getting at. Like, no matter what strategy you embark on, you're going to give something up. And that's one of the things that makes endgames like insanely hard to play. The choice is vast, but there is nothing to grab onto. You're in the middle of the ocean, and you're trying to grab onto little pieces of debris to avoid drowning.
And I have a comment here. Queen c4 check, king h7, queen h4 looks nice. I guess queen d8, h4, same idea. It does look pretty nice, and black will have to curl up in a ball and play queen e8, and the game continues. Like, black is covering all the weak points.
Well, queen d1 check also has to be factored in, right?
Yeah, that's true. Queen d1 just defending h5 in that manner.
Levon Chekovich and queen f7. That is, well, a temporary fork. It can be defended against with a check on d1. It has to be defended against with a check on d1. It's the only move. Or is it?
Queen d1, king h2? I don't...
Because queen b4 gives up 2 pawns, which is too much of a price to pay, I assume.
Well, if that's the case, then it might already be losing for black.
Are we sure? Don't want to be a slave to the evil bar here, but it's... Fabi's confidently grabbed on b4. That's the kind of move I would only play if I thought for, like, the remainder of my time and saw nothing else. Is this harder to win than it seems?
Yeah, in a weird way. And, like, Fabi's defensive task is relatively straightforward, right? Just put your queen on a square that defends g7, and then make sure your bishop and queen are in line with one another, and then
but where?
Try to repeat moves. Right, but that's the problem is at some point white will play f3, right? Bring the bishop to d4, and there may even be a timely like bishop takes g7 that you have to look out for.
This is so instructive. I have a feeling Fabi has studied this type of endgame, right? You don't study specific positions in the endgame like you do openings. You study schematically, right? You study like, okay, some position that's bishop in 3 against bishop in 1. Amazing knowledge by Fabi. It looks like he's borne out by the computer. Levon didn't even think for a second to take the queen. Robert, is it intuitive to you that in the event of a queen trade, it's a draw? Because channeling Robert Hess, I see that the h8 square is the right color, which is some good news for white.
But to me, it looks like a draw because the pawns are all on the same side of the board. And oftentimes what happens for our audience is that the bishop is going to try to sacrifice itself for 2 of the pawns, and otherwise the third pawns will get traded. So I get what Fabi's going for here, but like for Levon, he's just gonna have to keep putting pressure on Fabi. You're making the right arrows, F3, H4, like just try to expand bit by bit, but it's not going to be easy. Maybe Fabi really has this in the bag in terms of the memory bank, I should say, but proving it at the board is always difficult, including rook and bishop versus rook, which is a theoretical draw, but always a nightmare to defend.
Maybe I'm overstating the case, but if he can hold this, this will be just incredible bit of knowledge. And I say knowledge because, yeah, he went for this instantly, and it's crazy. Two full extra pawns. If Levon fails to win, we'll show what would have happened if the queen's traded. We'll flesh that out. Levon's got that option whenever he wants it, though. So that's another way to think about it. You can try everything with the queens on the board and keep as the worst case scenario, okay, now let me try the endgame with the queens off. It's a question of time until he pushes this h-pawn. But he also can play g4. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I don't think this is a draw. Like, I don't understand how it would be. I see the evaluation bar, like, now it's all the way up. So I think it was just a depth issue, maybe, where it didn't realize that it's as good as it is for white, and especially because of what you said, Danya. The h8 square matches the dark square bishop, which means that black can never just bail out with a queen trade and sacrificing the bishop for a couple pawns so easily.
But you want to hear something crazy? If I remember correctly, if you take the bishops off the board, I actually think, and then you swap like the f pawn for the g pawn, queen g and h against queen is actually incredibly hard to win. It sounds ridiculously easy, like queen and two extra pawns, you just force a queen trade. But because of the possibility of stalemate, that actually might be even harder to win. The bishops here might favor white in a sudden twist and turn of events.
Well, the bishops here definitely favor white because there's checkmate on g7 that black always has to look out for. And there are different plans that white can execute, like h5, h6 at the right moment could be disastrous for black because you can't take on h6, queen h8 would be mate. But you can just keep expanding because the black queen is completely tied down both to the light square bishop, but more importantly to the g7 pawn. So g4 does not blunder the f3 pawn. The queen cannot take it, but Levon is just inching forward right now. I don't know how Fabi withstands the pressure, but he's doing a great job thus far.
I can give you a guarantee that this exact type of endgame, maybe to the point of like this exact position, has occurred before. So as Fabi contemplates his impossible defensive task, I ran a little search. I have some cool insights that I'll save for after the game. Levon has to cross the Rubicon. He has this last bit of progress he has to make, right? Does he do that by pushing his f-pawn? And what does he need to avoid here? What does Levon need to watch out for, in your opinion?
It's hard to answer that question because it looks, at least visually speaking, like black can do almost nothing besides shuffle, and white can make a bunch of useful moves. But I'm guessing it's about timing. I don't know for sure. I won't pretend to. G4, that's going to be natural. The f3 pawn will be tender. You can always push it to f4. But I think it's timing. Like, he plays g4, but it's timing when to bring the king to g3, and he's already done both of those things. So he's doing it before I can even finish my sentence, and I guess he's very confident in his winning chances.
He wants to get this blitz underway, and in the meantime, Irina Krush, she's down to a minute. Exactly nothing has happened in that game. We've been through an entire lifetime of interesting positions here, and they're still essentially on status quo. So we might have an encore time scramble to watch if Levon's conversion is seamless. We've seen all sorts of crazy stuff in our commentator career and our player career, Robert. This is far from over.
No, you have to be accurate. If you're a defensive player, you have to hope and pose enough problems that allows you to believe in your chances to survive. And if you're Levon, you need to use your time wisely. It's over 9 minutes. He's done great in terms of his clock management in this game. And yeah, I think at this point he should play f4. But as I mentioned, it's not a move that you play lightly because it opens up the a8 h1 diagonal, which could be useful for some checks against the white king.
Okay. Using that big time advantage, he plays fast. Throughout his career, that has been his calling card. Levon, not a time pressure junkie. And it's situations like these when it comes in so handy. You can take that extra 2-3 minutes, calculate f4, make those decisions in a more informed fashion. What a grueling game. This has felt like a classical game, frankly. It does not have the the inherent chaos that attends to most rapid games. It's been very orderly, positional, deep, and exhausting to commentate. But so fun to commentate with one person in particular.
Yeah, it takes a lot out of me. Like I'm feeling like my energy is getting sapped, not in a bad way, like I'm upset about it, but like in a well, I'm calculating with each and every turn. I'm not certain. I've been honest about that. Like I feel like White should be winning, but then I see this move Queen A7 played, and Queen G1 check would maybe force a draw on the spot. So it's really complicated. These rich end games, and I'm actually really uncertain now. Like, how does White deal with Queen to G1? Because then you play
Ooh.
King to A2, G2, this Queen A2 check, and you start going back and forth.
And you mentioned this endgame rich in ideas. Poor Levon having to deal with these threats. Shalev in the chat points out a very important idea. H6 undermining the pawn and going for mate. Of course, here, there was Queen G1 check, but you have to keep that in mind if you're Fabi. H6 at some point, because the white queen has a million different boulevards and avenues that it can access to threaten this devastating check on H8.
I was thinking about that before, especially because you can F4, F5 later to box the black king in. But the problem right now is the white king. So your queen isn't free to go wherever it wants with Queen G1 available. And so Levon plays Queen E1. I think Levon,
Aimless.
that's exactly the word I was going to use.
Aimless. I mean, I think G5, H6, he should have invested more time. But if he flirts with, if he procrastinates, is Fabi going to at some point play like G5 or G6?
You know, it's funny you asked that question because we were just talking about how white wants to play H6 and like sacrifice a pawn to expose the full length of that diagonal there. So to play G6 willingly or G5 willingly is so interesting. But pawn trades are good. So like what I mean by that is trading off the G for the H pawn means that black's defensive task seems easier of like let me sacrifice my bishop for just those two pawns remaining and that's that. But I don't think Levon is going to allow that with ease.
Exactly, because one key piece of information, I won't move the pieces much longer, but this is really important for people to understand. If you get bishop and F and G against bishop, this I believe is a draw because black sets up this impervious construction where anytime white pushes F5, black simply gives the bishop up for white's remaining pawns. And because of opposite colored bishops, this is the point, this blockade cannot be infiltrated. In the meantime, one repetition and the bishop changes trains and changes diagonals. Queen e5 is not a thing, I believe, in this position.
Nope, because you can trade and play G6, as you were mentioning.
And Fabi, for that reason, he is baiting Levon into making an untoward step.
You know, Danya, I'm always hesitant before liquidating from both sides. On one hand, I'm like, Queen e5 must be a draw. And then the other, I'm like, there are certain endgames where if the white king can get up fast, then it's still winning even without the queens on the board. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I put on the two-board view just because of the time situation. Irina down to her last few seconds. So we'll passively put that up on the left side. But the meat on the bone is in Levon's game for now.
I mean, Tatv's done everything well to hold on in the board in red above my head. I think that she's really earning her day today. That first game with the black pieces, the King's Indian, was great. And here with white, she played timidly, but she knew the result she needed, and she's well on her way to getting it, but the game is not over.
And sorry, it was rude of me to change scenes and not give your point the proper attention it deserved. So, once again, or it was rude of me, or was it Macarian of me?
I really was not expecting that one. That was a surprising reference to Rudik Macarian. But in this game here, Danya, I mean, white is going to continue to shuffle, and the one above your head, Queen C3, Bishop B1, I assume. Just make sure you don't lose your piece. The bishop has just enough scope on that diagonal to hang in there.
I think I understood why I had deja vu. I feel like I had this exact type of endgame against this Czech Grandmaster Laznička. Not Lazovic, but Lasnichka.
Victor Lazarenko.
I'm going to look this up. This would be unbelievable. I feel like I had exactly this type of position. He ended up blundering his bishop, but I might be misremembering. It's crazy. I'll save that until after the game. We don't have time for this right now.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, though, if that actually was your game. But right now, Fabi down to 3.5 minutes approximately. He's continuing to bring his bishop back and forth. It feels winning. It feels winning, but as I said numerous times at this point, I'm just not certain.
And now I am certain about whether I'm getting up there in years, and the answer is yes, but I'll save that for after the game. Tatev is saving nothing, leaving everything on the board except the queens. She has to keep e5 under lock and key. This is on the orange board, folks. Does Irina have any hope of turning this around and staging a last-second victory?
She would need to get f4, king g6, king f5 in,
Ooh!
right now.
I'm also looking at the eval bar, and I don't mean to be like just staring at it, but plus 5.6, it tells me that something cataclysmic has occurred. And is it the tactic with bishop takes g7? Like, black can't go bishop b2 because of the fork. If black plays queen e6, I think there's bishop takes g7. And if black moves the queen away, maybe white is able to play g5.
Wait, but so queen e6, bishop g7, queen e1 check?
Oh, crap. Yeah, king f4. King f4.
Are you serious?
Queen d2, queen e3.
Wow, what an adventure.
Oh! But Irina's the one who made a mistake. Crazy things happening. She's going to go full send with her king. This game's not over.
The bishop g5 for some reason was a mistake. She's going right after this f4 pawn. Maybe it was just like king e2 to f3.
Bishop c7. Yeah, I think.
Oh. Yeah, bishop c7 to d6 was good, but also king e2 to f3 and bishop f6, and black hardly had a move.
But white's not losing this. Like bishop e3 and king e2 is just a fortress, and only white can win, whereas Tatev only needs a draw.
So then, kind of keeping that in mind, it's smart the way she's playing.
Does Levon go g5 now, using the fact that this bishop is so vulnerable? Oh,
g5, queen d5?
No, I think queen h5 might be a draw. And then queen g5, queen d2.
That would be amazing.
And Levon avoids it. He's playing like a boss here.
He's just lining him up toward the g7 pawn. Bishop d5, f4, as you're pointing out. Then g5 is possible. King h4. You can just continue improving piece by piece.
More chess. Yay.
Oh, my goodness. Never ending.
Tatev is flirting with disaster, just like she did yesterday. And as long as she keeps her king on e2, she's okay.
So king e4, king e2, king d4.
Yeah.
What's the next move?
Stop it. Bishop e1. Shut it down. What is bishop e7? Irina may be going for h4. And Tatev allows it.
Yeah, h4 doesn't feel scary. You're putting your pawn on a dark square.
Levon puts his pawn on a dark square, and it's scary as fill in the blank.
As Fabi.
Anything but fabulous.
I think, yeah, Tatev should be taking this game.
Tatev will be saying ta-ta if she plays king f3 here.
Well, her steely determination is just to be applauded.
Was that a pun?
Tata steal.
Oh my god. Wake up.
Oy, 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 Danya.
I haven't gotten my Z's lately.
We got a lot to talk about, you and I. How could you not get that?
I'll see you after class. That was amazing. I apologize.
Look at your chat saying, wake up.
That was the,
No.
Wait a minute. What is the eval bar doing? It's certainly woken up. That game's over. It doesn't matter whether white wins or draws. That's a moot point. The black king has no way forward.
Yeah, that's the board above me. Tatv-Ina just needs a draw with the white pieces. She might as well win it if her opponent allows her. And for Levon against Fabi, we see that we're entering Yeah, winning endgame because if the queens come off, white is winning. Levon has this
Pre-move.
covered.
Pre-move, queen takes g7, and knowledge of basic theoretical endgames is one thing Levon has. More chess. Fabiano Caruana cannot hold this together, and Levon, he keeps his legs churning. He wins on demand, and he forces stage 2 of the playoff.
Wow, we're gonna get blitz chess between Levon and Fabi, and then on the other side of things, I mean, Irina's just doing anything she can to keep hope alive, but she's gonna lose the game. I think, if anything, there's no way that Tatv-Ina can lose with the white pieces on the board in red.
Well, there's one way, which is like the h2 pawn can fall, but you would have to like actively sabotage your own chances. Tatev goes to g3. Can Irina try this? But Tatev can also just go back to f3.
Just rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat. And that's what she does. Oh, shush. Computer. You don't know anything, okay, about the circumstances, so you keep it shut and watch the game. There we go.
Yeah, overly critical. No need to be so harsh. And the point is, I guess, that Irina's king has no way in. The bishop has to stay in touch with the c5 pawn, and oh,
What happened?
just the eval is going up, up, and away.
Well, there's a forced win, I'm sure, but king e4, bishop
King,
d6 is precisely the kind of thing that would scare me.
so king g3,
Uh-huh.
doesn't that force king e5 and then king f3 is a draw by now, or
Well,
no?
Irina goes bishop d6, but king takes h3, white is winning.
Yeah, but Irina had to. And then that's the sign of a good fighter, is you'd rather lose the game than make a draw and get eliminated. But what does the draw do for her?
And push time USA. Population Tatev. G5, king e4, g6. And actually, it is tempo for tempo. White gobbles up both queenside pawns.
Oof.
That's all she wrote. That's all she wrote. Well, they're not writing anything because it's a rapid game. But a hand will be extended from Irina Krush. What a comeback victory, Robert. You got to take your hat off to Tatev after, the psychological blow that she suffered yesterday. To just come back with such a convincing victory is awesome. Awesome to see.
Yeah, that was tragic, the way she spoiled the advantage against Alice, right, from Tatev's perspective, but she is just mopping up right now. Donna, the King's Indian has been serving her pretty well. I mean, Alice found that really lovely knight g5 idea and made Tatev pay, but against Irina, it worked to perfection.
And so Tatev rewarded with a revenge match against Alice Lee. And she'll have to beat her twice. But
Oof.
right now, she got to focus on getting some rest, celebrating this awesome win. And the only question, will she win this game or will it be recorded as a draw? It's just a moot point. It's purely academic. I think she'll win.
I don't think she has a choice. I mean, Irina is not going to offer a draw, so now it's over. Tatev Abrahamian, she is taking this one, the match, and there it is. She moves into the grand final against Alice Lee. But as you said, Danya, she needs to win 2 matches in a row. And Alice, it seems like even when things are going wrong, they're not going wrong enough for her. She has been resilient, she's been resourceful, and that's why she went through the winner's bracket the whole way.
No matter the time control, classical, that knight g5, rapid, even bullet. Yesterday, I learned my lesson. Alice has been a smooth operator all the way. Does she have that last bit of grit left in her system? She plays so well at the American Cup, and that tradition will continue. Our tradition of commentating Blitz games and doing marathon shows continues as well, because Fabiano Caruana, and they're doing an instant replay.
Oh, I was like, yes, they're starting already. This is perfect because it's 8 p.m. here, or 8:09, I should say, and I would have loved for them to get started.
Yeah, it's 4:09 here. We're only 4 hours apart, which is crazy.
Just for 9 more days, I think.
But I'm not like exhausted. I want to go to sleep. My brain is just like, I want to either donate some rating points or just watch some Netflix. But we're going to get something better than Netflix. We're going to get Caruana Aronian.
Yeah, just as special. And for Levon and Fabi, this is not their first time squaring off. And in fact, even this event, it's not their first time. Remember how upset Levon was when Fabi knocked him down to the losers bracket?
Hmm.
That the two classical games were drawn. Then Fabi won. Then Levon won, and then Fabi won the decider with black.
Indeed. Um, I can't show the end of my game with Magnus, but again, we never know when the games begin, and this is something the organizers have to fix. The schedule has to be adhered to, and yeah, there's multiple formats, but you just got to find a way.
It says in the schedule that it was supposed to start 10 minutes ago, and I
Okay.
know that they interview people. That's part of the production, but they also have delays to make sure that fair play is upheld. But for Blitz, you don't need as long of a wait, right? Like for classical chess, maybe 15 minutes, great, 30 minutes, whatever you choose, you're right. But for Blitz, you don't need that long.
Remember how Caruana and Nakamura first faced off in like the Monaco Olympiad?
Yeah.
Well, Aronian and Caruana first faced off in the Dresden Olympiad 2008. But get this, Levon played for Armenia and Fabi played for Italy. And now they're
Yes.
facing off in the U.S. Championship. Who would have known back then that fate has this in store for these two gladiators?
And just think about that, by the way. 2008. So they've been facing each other for 17 years.
Yeah, and Levon was 27.57 back then. Fabi was 26.40. Levon won that game and the next one and the next one. And he won their first four encounters
Wow.
before Fabi beat him in a blitz game. Fabi's first win in a classical game, 2012.
Levon, I mean that we're talking about Levon's peak, like his peak when he was number two in the world. So Bobby being that much younger than Levon, I guess that's where Levon could assert his dominance until Fabi himself.
Levon.
Levon.
Levon from Yerevan. Actually, my favorite accent in Russian is the Armenian accent. Very mellifluous.
Ooh, lovely word.
Yeah. It's I don't know what to compare it to. It's like a very pleasant sounding, juicy.
Oh,
What?
sorry, I thought you were defining the word mellifluous, and I was like, oh yeah, that is what it means indeed.
Um, yeah, that is what it means. And I'm just watching Carissa Yip giving an interview in her very unique style. Looks like the playoffs are coming up, which could mean
Ooh.
an hour or a minute. Okay. Should I?
When was the first time Hikaru faced Levon? Was asked as well.
Levon, Aronian. Well, I tell you, in Yerevan you have the best shashlik, best meat, grilled kebab. He faced him first in, 2003 they had an online game, Dos Hermanos Blitz. Their first OTB game, Gibraltar, 2005.
Wow.
Gibraltar.
Is that the source of, those famous stories of I feel like there's a lot of conflict in those Gibraltar tournaments.
Dude, I played there once, 2015, and the hotel where the tournament is held, where I stayed, the Coletta, it's an iconic building. It was demolished. It doesn't even exist anymore. That's how fraught with like drama it was. They had to demolish the whole thing. Or it's closed. It's no longer a hotel. A strange event, but I played really well there. I really liked it.
I never played. It seemed awesome though. They seemed to really just take care of the players, and the chess was always exciting. Lots of fighting chess because you had to score a bunch of points to win the tournament.
Well, the organizer, a British grandmaster, the reason he couldn't keep hosting the event is he had to join the Francisco Pizarro for his conquest.
I was like, what did he do? And I understood what you meant. Stuart Conquest.
Yep. For folks, that was his last name. And who did I play in that year in Gibraltar? I played Adibon, Yakovenko. I lost to David Howell in a crucial game.
Oh.
Precisely. And that's all I remember.
When you said "anda," I thought you were about to go into one of your accents.
Like, I play Nikita V2 Golf. Nikita V2 Golf.
I'm checking this Gibraltar tournament.
I think it's 2015. And then I played, before my flight back to London, I played Blitz all night with Salam Saleh. And then we played all night in the hotel. We took a taxi to the airport and then played for hours in the airport, got on the plane, got off in London, played a little bit more, and then went our separate ways.
That is both disturbing and impressive at the same time. Also, I found this tournament that you played in. Ooh, you played against Prasanna Vishnu, Kevin Spraggett. You played against Salome Malia, Adiban, Vityugov, Howell, Yakovenko, Sandipan. Yeah, you've kind of had a very tough slate of opposition.
Yeah, I played well. I beat Adiban with the black. That was a proud game. Although Hikaru was crinkling his nose and giving me the looks of what am I doing watching amateurs play throughout that entire game.
Hikaru, I assume, won the tournament that year because he won like every time he played, I thought.
I think so, yeah.
Let me click on his name. Yeah, he beat Nabati, Grandelius, Adiban, Topalov, drew David Howell, beat Yu Yengi, and then drew Axel Bachman and Hari Krishna.
Yeah, Tamir and Rajabov Nabati. Okay, should I maybe just finish showing that Magnus game? What do you think?
Yeah. I'm gonna grab some more water. You show your game.
Sure. And what I will do is, if the games begin, that's because I was showing the Magnus game. So it's a win-win.
Yep. All right, I'll be right back.
Take your time, partner. All right, guys. Grind continues, and let me see if I can pull up Freestyle Friday. Okay, so I just wanted to show one line that I was proud of calculating. Here it is. Flip the board. Yeah, so basically, where did I stop? I stopped around this point, and here I played knight back to d7. Actually, wait, let me go to one board. Let me go to one board. Just a second, guys. Live board. Chrome. Just a moment. There we go. Now we've got the one board scene. Now you should see the board. And after I played knight c5, there was one line that I was really proud of calculating, which is like I played knight e4, and I'm threatening a fork on d2. Magnus goes rook c1, knight d2 check. If he had gone king to e1, I play knight takes b3, rook b1. I didn't even see rook e4 check. I was relying on knight c5. That's hilarious. I was relying on knight c5, rook takes b4, and knight d3. This was this morning. But rook e4 just wins on the spot. So instead, Magnus went for the rook endgame, which I assume is a draw. I'm actually not sure. Maybe Robert will have some insight, but I managed to win it, essentially by accident. Like, I shuffled around for a bunch of time. I cut off his king, and then I was like, wait, I think this is winning. And I managed to get out of it. If he takes my pawn, I trap his rook in g7. This I noticed. And that's it. My king broke free. And the rest is very straightforward. Yeah. I also beat Mamedyarov. I was really proud of that one. I beat Hans. This is like the tournament of my life, folks. Man, I had such a nice combination against Mamedyarov. Yeah, but he was already losing. So don't give me that he mouse slipped and that's why I won. So this position I had against Mamedyarov, I played this move knight to b7, vienketoing my knight. The point is to isolate his d7 pawn. Queen d5, we get into the endgame. My knight is very safe. Knight d6, and here I calculated the winning combination. Takes, 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 takes. Rook c8 looks like he's winning the pawn, but rook d1, and it's a double attack. I'm threatening the fork and the back rank mate. You can't stop both. Yeah. Dude, I understand Hans doesn't like losing to me. His dad never likes losing to the son. I totally understand that. That's understandable. Curious if I was lost against Bluebaum in the end. Oh my god, I was completely lost. Jesus. It's like +2. But then I trapped his queen. Crazy. Oh, and I kept it together. For once in my life, only to get screwed on the tie breaks. Yeah, I don't get it. So I get 4th out of 5. So the people who pass me on tie breaks are Bortnik, who wins the tournament. Congrats. Lazovic. I think, who else was it? Bortnik, Lazovic, MVL, and I was 4th. Who did they win? Who did they beat? Thoughts on Hans refusing to do the test? I guess we got time to chat now because the games will probably begin in like a century from now. Yeah, like Robert said yesterday, I think I'm staying away from that topic. Like that's a topic that is sure to make the chat blow up. My thoughts are not particularly sophisticated. Sorry, I'm just keeping an eye on the main show to see when the games begin. Thank you, Luti. I think you should do it. I think it's, regardless of what you think about the whole spectacle of the match, who you were rooting for, I think not doing it is an own goal. Like, again, keeping Dubov's behavior separate, that's irrelevant. I think if you want to avoid an own goal, you should do it, just like by default. Just a second. Yeah, so like, obviously Dubov I think Dubov behaved inappropriately at the end of the match. I had firsthand like vision of that, of the camera. That is totally irrelevant. But if you gave your word and you lost the match, the onus is on you. You got to like coordinate things within reason. So to me, like it's a non-starter to suddenly renege based on perceived slights. It just sends the wrong kind of message, in my opinion. But it sounds like he's going to do it. It's none of my business. I'm just a spectator watching the drama unfold.
Dang, seems like I missed some exciting conversation.
Yeah, I was just like quickly running over some of my games, but I'm kind of too tired to like make any sense of my own moves. I mean, I can't even explain the moves I made this morning. They're expecting me to explain a move I didn't make 2.5 years ago. Yeah, there's no hope of that.
They're asking the right questions.
Uh-huh. I see what you're aiming at. Not gonna lie.
When does this game
Yeah, they're
start?
interviewing Tatev right now. Like sorry, I feel like everybody has their buttons, right? Everybody has their sore spots. For me, it's always, especially if I'm tired to begin with, it's like the like endless delays. Just do the interview in parallel and then air it after the show, or put it out on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean they got priorities, which makes sense, and it would be nice though to get these games underway, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I was asked about Hans not doing the polygraph, of course. Like you said yesterday, better to stay away from it because emotions run very high. I really struggle when I stream to like contain the chat if we have a topic like this, because when the chat is going a million miles a minute, like the thoughts get jumbled in my mind. I literally, like, my tongue gets tied. So
Yeah, I just feel like these conversations they often sort of escalate, and I don't really get involved in them as best I can.
yeah, of course, like I discussed this with friends. I'm interested. I commentated the match. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not involved. Hashtag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought you were not involved.
I thought so too, but I just, the match came to me. Shimano and I thought the polygraph was going to happen immediately after the match. Like the way I saw it, there was like a machine waiting, and then they would be led into a dungeon or like a room. and the ceremony would take place. That was like, like the little nut at the center of the candy. It was the dessert. But we were led to believe,
Yeah.
like, no, that was never the plan. Why would you ever think that? I was like, well, I don't know. Thought that was the whole point.
As somebody without, a stake in any of this, I think that would have been the best outcome. Like if I were watching some random people in some totally different game or sport and they had a showdown, I think that's what probably should have happened.
Yeah, I mean, the match was very entertaining. I enjoyed commentating it, but we'll see where it goes from here. Yeah. Chess world is a very chaotic place these days.
Yeah. I just I like the chess that's happening on the board and all that other stuff is the extracurriculars are not my focus for sure.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I try to stay abreast of it, but I'm not like that interested. I think people have a hard time understanding that like I'm only truly interested in the chess, like genuinely, not from a perspective, oh, look at me, being above the drama. No, it's just I love the game too much.
I get you. I mean, if you changed my name to drama, you would be above drama right now.
Okay, that was pretty good. I'll give you an A minus.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, now I need to go to the bathroom. I mean, now there's more discussion. Upcoming events, GCT Romania. I don't care. Just start the game.
Yeah, but yeah, I also want the game to start, but the club, as part of the Grand Chess Tour, they host, of course, the St. Louis Rapid and
Keep
Blitz,
talking. I'll
as
be
well
right
as the
back.
Simple Cup. Yeah, go for it. You're gonna be right, Tony Nyback. I said.
I'm finished with these puns.
Oh, there we go. Make prediction what Levon will play first and how Fabiano will respond. Then go through 10 moves of theory. I can't do that. It's a blitz game. They're just going to throw things at each other and hope that it works out. What is up with the chat? Where are people tuning in from? Who are you rooting for? I want to hear it if you're a Levon fan or if you're a Fabi fan. And I guess, who do you think that Hikaru is rooting for? Who would Hikaru rather play? Neither is an easy opponent. Duh. They're elite chess players. But I feel like Hikaru maybe would rather play Levon just because they haven't played in this event. Okay, this is helpful. What's going on? You think Hikaru would rather play Levon because dynamics. You're neutral towards both. You're rooting for Fabi. Hikaru has nightmares about Fabi. Levon is such a nice guy. I really hope he manages to win. Some people just trying to start some unnecessary drama. You're still reeling from the jokes? Yeah, I am as well. I am as well. Okay, but while Donnie's gone, maybe he can hear me. Can we just give him another round of applause for beating Magnus Carlsen today with the Black Pieces in Freestyle Friday? Pretty sick. Like the way he was able to win that game. Just started with a perfect score. Got on a hot streak, beat some elite players, even in addition to Magnus. So I thought that was really cool. I was happily watching that while he was playing, and I was cheering him on. And I see all of you saying, let's go, Danya. W Danya. Indeed. Danya is definitely not over the hill. Hello, Danya.
I'm very flattered. I want to thank you and everybody for the compliments. I am very proud. Honestly, like I know it's just an online tournament. I know I got screwed on the tie breaks, but I'll take it. I'll take it. And I really, really appreciate people's love and support. It contributes to my elo, and we've unbelievable.
The game you
Wow. But this is unbelievable. Another Rosolimo. Dramatical finish.
You arrived at just the right time. Not only was I complimenting you, but the game has gotten underway. And wait, Danya, we have a repeat of that variation from earlier, which was going well for Fabi until it wasn't.
Yeah, and Levon will have to deviate first because Fabi is not going to spend his golden tempi fiddling around with this useless a pawn.
And the good news for Levon is he doesn't need to win this game. So the pressure is not nearly as high. Black, you see the bishop on b7. It's a ugly looking piece for the moment, but Black can consider playing for d5, striking the center. Also the right moment, c5. Maybe now Daniel's c5 is tempting for Fabi.
Because if you procrastinate another turn, the rook will land on d1, setting up threats of knight takes c6. Of course, queen can slide over to c8, but the storm clouds do start to gather around the black king. I mean, f4, rook f3 comes to mind. Your point is well taken. I think c5, it's a good time to strike before it's too late.
And so Fabi, he's thinking he does play c5. No longer is he thinking, well, he should be thinking on his opponent's turn as well. And now the question, Don, is what? Oh, f5, e takes f5. What's your follow up there? And then rook takes. Wow, that's a nice variation.
But Fabi just a little bit reluctant to engage Levon concretely. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, keep going. I'm curious to hear. Like, you think he's reluctant and he's just not pressing in the moment that calls for it?
I don't want to draw connections when they don't exist, but like the last game, right? Defending the a pawn, wasting that tempo here, maybe sensing the moment to play f5 to open up the position, because you do have the bishop pair in a 3+2 game. That becomes even more important.
In his restraint, usually we applaud people for showing that, because so many people are just full steam ahead, never slowing down. But Fabi's actually caused Levon to slow down. I think because of the ambiguity of the position, the bishop pair for Black, Levon may not feel totally comfortable.
And that's borne out by his time consumption. He's now a minute down. He's used to being on the other end. He's used to being a minute up. What is he thinking about? Now, f4 allows f5 again. I walked into that once. E takes f5, knight to h6 this time, with disastrous consequences for white.
That's just strategically almost winning for Black. The bishop on b7 laughs because there's the whole diagonal available to it. So knight g3 is the play from Levon. He's stopping f5.
Exactly. My thoughts showing us that he takes this idea seriously. d5 is a non-starter, so he's trying to control the pawn breaks and control the position as a result.
If not for knight e5, was there some kind of like knight d5, knight f5 tactical sequence? Because g7 with the queen on g4 was directly under attack.
I'll tell you more. I mean, even if it's a positional long-term sacrifice, that is how valuable the f5 square can be in these positions. Fabi taking these threats very seriously as he, I think, prepares to drop his bishop back to f8. Now, you know what Tatev would do here. She'd send that f-pawn up the board, and her compatriot might be doing the same, but first he gets his king far away from the drama.
So I understand why Levon did not play f4, because he thought the dark squares would be too vulnerable. Already, Fabiano has advantage in the light squares, thanks to the bishop on b7, the pawn on e6. That pawn is super valuable. It stops both knights from jumping forward. And now after knight a4 done, the c5 pawn is under attack. d6 drops the e6 pawn. Don't forget about the queen on h3. What would you do here?
Bodacious. Knight d4. We saw Levon sacking a pawn like that with the black pieces in the Italian, right? But here, knight d4 runs into knight takes c5, and that is not the way that you want to give up the pawn. d6, well, that gives up the e6 pawn. Black is suddenly experiencing these very concrete problems with his weaknesses.
Maybe that knight needs to jump elsewhere. Knight b4 comes to mind. You protect c5, you attack a2, and if white says, okay, I'll push that pawn forward, then knight jumps all the way into c2, and then clearly Black is better.
My inclination was actually more passively knight d8 so that I can play d6 and link up these pawns. But I'm all for aggression, and I'm all for the d4 square. Let's see what Fabi decides.
Although knight b4, rook d2, like a3 would be next. Oh, so he went a totally different direction to knight a7?
Yeah, he went down west. He went down over to Nebraska over to knight a7, trying to go knight c8, I guess.
I just don't
Yuck.
fully. I think he wanted to keep the 8th rank open. Knight b4 was a little bit too risky, and so he's just playing passive chess. The good thing for Fabi, though, Danya, look at the time. He's got double Levon's clock.
And it's time to fire up that eval bar because it's going to be swinging a lot, and I know people like that. So 30 seconds. Levon procrastinating. He's holding off on f5, and Fabi can play g6 and f5 himself. I think it's a great chance to activate that light squared bishop.
Yeah, that's really nice find by you. He didn't play rook e8, makes sense as well. F5, ef5, the e4 pawn, the e3 bishop loose behind it. I think Fabi has the easier position to play because there's more of a burden on Levon to prove something.
And there's also a trap. Do not take on c5 because g6 would have dislodged the bishop. Levon is stumbling and bumbling and struggling to find a plan. Fabi is improving his position. The time situation, dire for Levon.
And knight c3 is good. Here comes the knight to d4. e5 loves the white knight into d5 first. I don't think I would be about that business. But there is a bishop on b7, Danya. So e5 not fully out of the question.
Some pretty crazy parallels with that Italian game. Fabi had a pawn on f5. So Levon, similar to that game, can switch his attention to the king side, but not while the center has the possibility of opening up. So knight h5. Fabi will take on f5, open the e-file. Levon, so much to keep track of with only 13 seconds. As he swings the queen hither and thither it goes. It might park itself on relative safety on h3. We'll see.
The queen on h3 is safe and sound. Rook f4, a weird rook lift, but it would head on over to h4 after that. And the h7 pawn is tender. So, I mean, black forces the queen back, Danya. Good news for Fabi. He's got more time. Bad news is his king is starting to feel the heat of white's pieces coming into the attack.
Rook lift. So in America, we call it a rook elevator. But which pawn do you take? That's called a decision, and you don't like making them with 7 seconds on the clock. Great move, Levon.
Yeah, he doesn't make a decision yet. He wants to take on e6 when he's good and ready, and then plug the d5 square with his knight.
Is he ready? He is, but did he mistime it?
It would appear so, just based on the evaluation going down. I thought this was an incredibly logical sequence.
White is not worse. Fundamentally sound, everything's protected. Now, the e4 pawn is an isolated pawn. The position is balanced. I think equal is an assessment that most of us can get behind. The knight gets in front of the h pawn and maneuvers to c3.
Love that move, bishop b7, though, because the knight can come back to c6, and now the knight goes up to d4. And, Donnie, we've been clamoring for f5 from black. Watch that move happen when Levon least expects it. Like now.
Amazing. Bishop h4, Levon adjusts, slithering his way into the dark square weaknesses. It feels to me like he's taking over the initiative, and it's an all-out time scramble now as Fabi has frittered away his time advantage. E takes f5 has been allowed.
Oh, no, the h5 pawn is weak as well. The knight slides back to f4. Donnie, this is looking worse and worse for black.
And without the queen, the black bishop can just shumble. Oh, knight g6.
G6? Oh, Levon walked right into it.
He is an assassin. And king takes f6. Do not take the rook. And still.
And now it's Danya, 2 minor pieces, 2 bishops for the rook. I mean, Fabi's now in charge.
Not easy, though, because you might lose a6. Although I think you might trap the knight there. Levon is broken.
No, this is bad. The bishop on c6 dominates that knight. Oh, gosh. Fabi improving every single piece. What a shame, Danya. Rook f4. That was the howler.
And Levon's still trying to use whatever weapons at his disposal. He is getting smashed here. The walls are closing in just when it seemed like he was on the cusp of taking the game. Thunderstruck from the g6 square.
It's one of those games where you steal defeat from the jaws of victory. And every move that Fabi has played since then has seemingly been perfect.
Shark-like precision from Fabi.
Every move is good. And white has nothing left.
Every chamber is filled. And Levon on the hot seat once again. This time he'll have to win with the black pieces. Resignation is imminent. And he lets his time run out. And he'll have to win a blitz game with the black. What a turnaround. Amazing stuff.
What a game that was. I mean, Fabi, what I liked from his game was that he wasn't doing anything overly committal until he got into time trouble, and then he played f5. You know what I mean? Like, early on, he forced Levon to think, and then he played f5, causing himself some really serious weaknesses.
It was such a gutsy move, and ultimately, it was the game-winning move, Robert, because it allowed the g-pawn to vacate the square. And for Levon, it was a case of right square, wrong piece. Knight f4 was correct, then the other knight gets to d5, and white is clearly better. To find knight g6, though, the retreating knight move, I was all eyes on knight d3, I'll be honest. Amazing. He's a bad blitz player, yeah, Robert. Fabi's a terrible blitz player. He's really underperforming in blitz. He's watching these time scrambles. He needs to hop on chess.com and play some marathon sessions.
Yeah, it's amazing how over the years people just continue to harp on this. Oh, Fabi's he can't play blitz. He can't do this. Of course, he can play any time control, any format, any variant. Like the guy's an absolute beast. So he found the tactics when he needed to. And for Levon, Rook F4, just a clumsy move, and I think he is going to seriously regret that.
Yeah, he's not going to be ordering any happy schlemiels tonight. And how long will we go? Will Levon generate another must-win game? Fabi has deja vu. He was in this situation yesterday. He was in Levon's shoes. Wasn't able to win on demand, although he came oh so close. And it's a blitz game. Anything can happen.
I feel like I need to take a breath here. I'm just like so amped up for what's going to happen next. And I think that Fabi needs to figure out even his first move because you think, oh, just play whatever your experience, you can make a draw. No, some openings allow your opponent to play in a cagey style. And I think that Fabi would like to be forcing if he can.
In these situations, okay, e4 is the likeliest, but I've seen him play c4. C4 is the kind of generally solid move that can be played when you don't.
Well, Tanya, click on the game. We're way in there now.
Oh my gosh, sorry. It just doesn't. Sorry.
You're fine.
There we go. It's a Philidor.
Yes. And he'll have to show Philidor precision here from the black side in order to get anything resembling hope. But Danya, black is very passive, but white may be in danger of overextending if you're not looking out for all your pawns.
That's how the Caruana game started in the Najdorf, right? Hikaru just jumped in with a knight, and quickly he was backpedaling. This pawn on b4 is usually on b3 in these positions.
That's right. And now the bishop drops back to its starting square. The issue for Levon is at some point, if he wants to win this game, he has to take something. But if he takes on d4, in comes that knight to d4 and up to f5. The d6 pawn is a backwards one, a weakness. So I like what Levon's doing. I just am not sure how you proceed.
That bishop, it's usually on g7. Sometimes it's on e7. It is seldom on c7, and I don't think I've ever seen it on a7, and yet all of those squares are accessible.
It's the snake Philidor, right? Instead of the snake Benoni.
Now, d5 appeals to me, Robert, because the b6 square is controlled, but Fabi decides not to force the issue, and I totally get it.
He's just saying, hey, Levon, you need to win this game. You're going to have to do something of note. And thus far, Levon has put his pieces in pretty decent squares, but that bishop on c8, the rook on a8, they're not playing.
He's trying to shuffle. We know the players who like these structures. It's called the Hanem variation of the Philidor. It's the modern way to play. And Fabi, he ain't falling asleep in the center, waiting for the perfect moment to shut things down.
Nice move there. I don't know if there's an immediate threat, but white often tries to use that b6 square. Look out for your e4 pawn. Knight a4, if you had a free turn, would drop that e4 pawn, so I wouldn't advise that.
Indeed. You would love to be able to play knight a4, so Fabi needs to spend Levon's seconds finding the appropriate regrouping. Do you play bishop d3, knight d2, allowing c takes d5?
Okay, is there bishop g5 intermezzo after c takes d5?
No, you didn't. Did you just Rudakovsky me again?
I feel like that's just a strong move, right?
All right, Vasily. It's an amazing move. And if Fabi played knight d2 with the intention of delivering this intermediate move, I'm taking my non-existent hat off yet again.
Yeah, your proverbial hat can go back where it belongs in the closet with your other clothes. But right now, I think that Fabi is trying to.
Oh! That was a huge move. And Robert, you need to jump into the American Cup 2026. You're the wild card. That was awesome. Boom.
I don't think so, but it was a strategic move. And you know me, I love these types of positions where strategy, it blossoms into tactical play. And here we see that the queenside expansion, that's going to happen in the near future.
I will show this, folks, after the game. We don't have the time. It's a blitz game. And what a huge moment, because now We get a structure that we have talked about before. Black has a clear roadmap of expansion. White, Fabi, there have been moments where he starts losing the thread in the early middle game, and he needs to kind of readapt, maybe bring the queen out, and just lay down the hammer here.
Yeah, bishop b5, a nice find from Levon. His bishop on c7 is not a particularly good piece. Of knight b6, he can just capture that piece and start trading. And the knight on g6 has an avenue to attack from, f4 or h4 in the future.
Well, hey, I mean, white wants to play c2, c4. There's car sharing. There's like apartment sharing. Why isn't there square sharing? And the next startup founder, the knight, retreats to let the pawn through.
I actually really like that move knight d2, and the reason why is he went knight c4 on the previous turn, so he recognized his mistake and he's not too proud to admit it.
And c4 is coming. When is it coming? I would consider starting with queen h5. If black rushes the move f4, Robert, the e4 square becomes a serious outpost for the white knight.
Strategically, f5 to f4 is horrible. That's why I started with rook f8, a very good choice from Levon. Also, f4 is meant by bishop b6, so you might want to wait until white plays c5 before pushing f4.
Phenomenal move, multi-purpose, but the main reason is to defend the f3 square so that after black plays f4 and the bishop moves away, the move f3 does not come with the desired effect. Fabi he's locked in right now, and he's got full board awareness.
And Levon says, Fabi, I respect your game, but I've got some of my own. Knight coming to e5, rook f6, rook g6 to follow down. We see the outline of an attack, but they say, right, a knight on f8 usually, but knight on f1, there is no mate.
And there's a lot behind the scenes. There's a lot going on in the kitchen. That bishop, it's dormant. If white plays c5, it could backfire. Black can play d takes c5 and open the diagonal. Starting to accumulate the pieces on the king's side, starting to equalize the clock. Fabi centralizes the bishop. This is the moment of truth. Can Levon stay in the tournament?
Big fan of that move, bishop to d4. And knight comes to e5. I think that's an incredibly natural move. So I'm getting rid of that question mark. How are you giving that move a question mark? It's such an obvious choice.
We have the power for now over the silicon monster. Let's enjoy it while it lasts.
Well, I think Fabi would like to enjoy this match and end it with at least a draw, but a win wouldn't hurt him either. But do you think Black is actually in that bad of shape? I see what the evaluation is, but Black looks to have some counterplay.
They're both under a minute. It's an unbalanced position. Like, spending too long trying to assess whether white is slightly better or much better is useless. Fabi is now under Levon. He's down to 30 seconds. He's calculating c5. I'm positive he's thinking about c5, and I think he's going to play it.
But that's a move you'd want to play instantly. Knight d2 is played instead, so you're not positive, but I think that was a positive move for white.
And the news for Levon are negative, because f2, f4, I think, is the hidden threat. It's a positional threat, but it would pulverize any of black's attacking chances on the king's side.
f4 is a lovely type of idea from white. Also f3, in the right moment. So what is the deal? Levon, he's got to find something.
7 seconds for Levon. f4 is a huge threat. He can't go knight d3 because of rook d3. He moves his queen. And now Fabi takes. Perfect timing.
Uh-oh. Levon spent all of that time just to allow white to storm these pawns. You can't play c5 yet. You drop the d5 pawn. That would be tragic. And Fabi tried to set it up.
And look at that clunker. It belongs in the junkyard. Black can never play f4, so he's paralyzed under his own pawns. Levon trying to reshuffle, getting the queen to g6. Game is still going.
Yeah, this is a really nice decision by Levon, trying to keep the d5 pawn in his line of sight. But f4, f3 is super tempting.
Even at the cost of an exchange. But Levon, he wants the best of both worlds. Get back to f1, he tells the knight. But what now? 2 seconds.
Oh, and look at Fabi. King h1. He's just shuffling. Both players are nervous.
Zen-like improvement by Fabi as he prepares c5.
And now c5 looks very strong.
Hesitates.
Uh-oh, but now black's pieces are improving, and that's why I went king h1, Danya, so there's no sort of discovery on the diagonal.
But that doesn't mean there aren't tactics. Although right now, if the rook moves, queen takes queen as a check. 2 seconds for Levon, trying to trap white's queen, allowing c6, and he's played it.
Uh-oh, Fabi's breaking through, and the g6 rook, so he blocks on the 6th rank. But
Rook
Danya, b5, so the a-pawn's a runner.
The fireworks sound. Levon backpedaling, trying to stop the pawns. 10 seconds for Fabi. Pawn pushes forward, and queen takes g6. What's the most
Not
convincing
enough.
win?
Maybe rook a1 first so you can threaten. No, but rook a1, rook takes e6.
A new lease on life, Levon keeping his legs churning, but oh, that's a linchpin.
That's gonna hurt. The black queen is not a good blockading piece right now.
But you got to find the finishing touches. Levon needs to win this with black. He needs a miracle.
The b pawn is going.
Oh my gosh.
Rook b6 is a blunder for some reason.
Do not play queen takes e4.
So Fabi, oh, queen
Queen
d5
d5,
now.
and it's over.
Oh, what a find there by
Or is
Fabiano
it?
Caruana.
Queen b7, a8, there was b2.
And here we go.
And rook a6 will end the game.
Rook a6 check is really nice.
And he sees it.
Fabiano Caruana, the player that people like, he can't play Blitz well. He's only a classical player. He doesn't have talent. He's just all, preparation and hard work. Look what he does in time scrambles. He played a really nice game there.
I really like Fabi. Fabi gets put into these categories all the time, right? Fabi's this, the restrictions, right? He's not this, he's not that. He's only good because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, no. He didn't do it against Hikaru, but Levon, what a worthy opponent, and what a run, which unfortunately comes to an end. This was equal, apparently.
Which position? Oh, wow.
Rook d7.
But no, it's just one of those positions, Danya, where the engine it spouts out the best move, says you got everything under control, but with no time on your clock and a pawn on a7 there. What about queen a6 as a response? How is this equal?
King h7 only move.
Oh, of course, yep.
Rook e7, and here's the thing. This would still lose the match, because Fabi would have taken and secured the draw.
Right.
And,
So,
wow.
ridiculous.
So Fabi misses the Rudakovsky move, but in the end, he stays the course and sets up another date with Hikaru.
Yeah, bishop g5, I think, would have been a cold shower for Levon there. And we've talked about this idea a lot today, right? Just trying to plug that square, leave your opponent with a bad piece. At the very least, white gained a tempo there by taking on d5 by hitting the bishop on e6, but this is just piling up pressure on a pinned piece. Now, this is awful for black.
Piling up pressure on a pinned piece, and normally not recommended to occupy a weak square with a pawn, but here you simply transform one square into another. Wow. What a game. What action. These days, I thought this tournament was going to be like 2-3 hour days. One rapid game, one quick classical game. No. This is a marathon.
Ooh, wow, what a day we just had. I mean, Tatv-Ina, she got it done against Irina Krush, and now Fabiano, he is able to win these Blitz games and make his way through to a rematch with Hikaru. So, I mean, Danya, what do you make of what we saw today?
All right, my last comment, because we're going to accelerate the wrap up here. I'm tired, and I just need to rest my vocal cords.
I understand that.
Amazing. I mean, just the fighting spirit really has been on display. And when you have different formats and different ratings and different levels, you get such a diversity of types of openings, right? You have Italians and King's Indians and different arcs, right? You have the Alice Lee arc. She's just been dominant from the start. You have Tatv-Ina. She had that heartbreaker yesterday, pounces back, defeats Irina Krush. Can she do it again against Alice Lee? You don't want to miss the conclusion of these narratives. And Robert, the last thing I'll say is there's a huge payoff for fans who've been with us from the start because you invested the time, you invested the hours. Now you get to watch how everything concludes, and that's going to be awesome.
It will indeed. And it's been a lot of fun, everybody. The week has been exhausting. Donna, I hope you enjoy your weekend. I hope everybody watching gets to enjoy theirs as well. And it's going to be Fabi against Hikaru. But I guess, I guess we should say goodbye to everybody because the weekend's for, what do they say, touching grass?
Fabiano, what do I mean, I did get turned away from the American Cup Blitz, not because I'm me, but because there is a hard and fast rule that it is only open to players with a residence in Missouri and the players of the tournament.
So you went and bought a home real quick in Missouri is what I'm gathering.
So exactly. a quick little $2 chuck in St. Louis. I took over Fabiano Caruana's residence, which is unfortunate because I really wanted to play. It's the only strong Blitz tournament in the U.S. really all year. I got third last year, but Sag, that's that. It might mean I'm available on Sunday, but tomorrow I am going to request my rest day, play the Bullet Brawl, just get a lot of sleep because I think we've earned it.
I agree, and this won't be the last time that Don and I team up. At least I doubt it. But I think for now we're gonna enjoy our weekends, and yeah, I guess if people want this to continue, we're definitely open to it. So hopefully you've enjoyed yourselves, and yeah, let us know. We're receptive people, open to hopefully positive feedback. But yeah, we're gonna keep on chugging along, and this is gonna be a recurring thing, we hope.
This is so much fun, Robert. I'm really happy. I'm a good kind of tired, and just to echo what you said, we're both at the stage of our lives where we want to blaze the path that we want to blaze. Just live in the moment, fill in the cliche, and we appreciate all the support, and we appreciate you getting your wallets out in whatever way you wish to do that.
I didn't expect you to say that. So funny.
I mean, everybody knew that Deanya is a toxic streamer, is going to guilt people into not subscribing. I mean, figures. I'm surprised he held it in for 5 years.
That's so funny. I was not expecting that at all. Oh my goodness. Well, I don't even know what to say after that. But
nothing, because we're ending the stream.
Yeah,
but
that was just too.
Go
funny.
on.
No, I got nothing else to say. That was awesome.
Well, this was awesome. You're awesome. And to all of our communities, thank you for the support. We'll see you again very soon. Peace out. Have a great weekend.